Chapter 3840. Arbor quickly turned around, and in an instant, she saw a thorn-like earth blade emerge from the ground. In the blink of an eye, the earth and stone beside her feet were cut into two and suddenly exploded. Arbor coldly looked back and saw a sneaky black shadow trying to retreat into the forest. The wood's spiritual power quickly slid around her wrist, forming a long vine that suddenly hooked the other party's ankle and pulled fiercely. The black shadow followed this tyrannical force and was immediately pulled out of the grass nest by Arbor. He fell heavily to the ground and let out a muffled groan. Xiao Mu didn't even spare that person a second glance as she tossed a god energy ball over with a flick of her hand. Since there was a simple and fast way to deal with others, Arbor was too lazy to do it herself. The divine power ball suddenly bombarded the other party's body, and a huge force heavily pushed him out, and he fell heavily to the ground. Cough, cough, cough. The black mask on the guy's face fell, revealing an extremely ordinary-looking face. Arbor glanced at him and then looked away. She didn't seem to have seen this person before. She didn't know where this clown came from, but he just had to stay here and make trouble with her. Just now, it was this person who scattered the illusion she left in the tree hole, right? Since he wanted to take her life, she naturally wouldn't let him go so easily. Thinking of this, Arbor had 2 more divine power balls in her hands. Before she threw them out, she suddenly saw the man's feet fiercely stomp on the ground, and like a fierce tiger, he pounced in her direction. He actually had the tendency to fight with his life. Arbor's lips curved into a sneer. She held the 2 divine power balls in her hands and threw them in the other party's direction without hesitation. At the same time, she jumped up, stepped on the void, and nimbly flipped over. She stepped on a swaying branch and coldly looked over. After hearing 2 loud, rumbling sounds, the surrounding trees were all flattened by the divine power balls. A circular depression appeared in the middle of the ground. The man fell into the depression and spat out mouthfuls of blood, trying his best to climb up from the bottom. The little lady is quite vicious and merciless. A cold voice abruptly appeared behind Xiao Mu. Arbor wasn't frightened by the newcomer. He turned his head to look at the newcomer with a cold expression. His eyes were filled with coldness, and there was not the slightest hint of joy, anger, sorrow, or joy. 3 people stood behind him. It was an old man in his 80s with a short beard. He was the one who spoke, and his triangular eyes looked at her calmly. 2 slightly younger men in their 50s were currently staring at her hand with strange expressions. Just now, this young lady threw out 2 divine power balls. She was really generous. Unfortunately, he was about to die. Do you have any last words? An old man in his 50s asked coldly with his hands behind his back. The Black Shadow Man, who had finally crawled out of the pit, raised his head at this time. His pair of narrowed eyes revealed a little bit of hatred. Why are you still talking nonsense with her? Hurry up and kill this woman. This young lady was very strange. According to his understanding of this young lady, he guessed that she might have more than 2 or 3 divine power balls in her hands. He waited with great difficulty until this young lady was alone and released a signal to them. You don't want to mess things up again. Who are you people? Arbor curiously glanced at the 3 old men. These 3 old men didn't look young. Chapter 3841. She opened her divine eye and scanned the area, but did not see anything strange in the heads of these 3 old men. If it was not Tianyun's men, then who could it be? It was obvious that she didn't recognize the man lying in the pit. Naturally, she did not know when she had offended him, but it did not matter. Since they came looking for trouble, then she would take care of the trouble as well, and there would be no more trouble. Arbor's gaze turned cold. A pair of pitch-black eyes, containing a cold light of nirvana, locked onto the black figure in the pit. Looks like you all want to die. Her figure moved, and in an instant, she pounced down from the treetops. Her slender figure turned in a circle in midair and was suddenly blocked by the old man in his 50s. The old man held a hook in each hand and fiercely hooked it towards her head. Clang! Arbor did not dodge at all, and directly let the hook fall on her defensive barrier. The old man's fingers trembled slightly from the rebound force of the barrier. His eyes instantly narrowed, and a glimmer of light flashed through his eyes. He shouted, "Damn girl, you came at the right time." His hands clasped together, and with one free hand, he clapped his palms towards her chest. At the same time, the other two old men did not stay idle. At this time, their figures also moved, and like a gust of wind sweeping away fallen leaves, one of them kicked towards Arbor's calf. That kick was swift and fierce, as if it was going to break Arbor's calf. The other person silently flashed behind Arbor and summoned a black broadsword from his consciousness. Aiming at the back of Arbor's head, he chopped it down. A three-sided attack, each move wanting to take her life. In the blink of an eye, Arbor's figure was surrounded from three sides and disappeared. When she reappeared, she had already retreated 10 meters away and came to the side of the black figure who had crawled out of the pit. Boom! The three pincer attacks simultaneously fell on the place where Arbor had left, and the surrounding soil was instantly blasted into a scorched wasteland. The old man's pupils constricted. Yet at this moment, Xiaomu had already grasped the shadowy man's throat and coldly asked, "Who exactly are you?" The man narrowed his long and dark eyes and spat out a few words with great effort. You will never know, ah." A terrifying divine sense suddenly pierced into the depths of his consciousness. The black shadow man felt a dull pain in his head and immediately wanted to cry out. However, Arbor did not give him much room to fight back. Ever since she advanced to the deity realm, she could already search souls on her own. She was too lazy to talk nonsense with the person in front of her. She searched for useful information on her own. Only then did she realize that the man in front of her was someone she knew. She had never met him before, but she had definitely heard of his name. In the Aurora Sandland, Miss Jing Minyao of the Panga clan had sent this man to the Yu family of the Shuntian prefecture to collude with Yu Batian and assassinate her in the underground arena of Qianluo. Yu Hui, whom Arbor had met in Qianluo's underground fighting arena, was actually guided by this person. This person's name was Brother Go, and she was also familiar with it. He was a good dog by Jing Minyao's side. She did not expect that Brother Go would still want to seek revenge after Jing Minyao had been dead for so long. He even chose such a time when she was alone. As for the three old men, to put it bluntly, Brother Go had issued a kill order in the black market and summoned 3 killers. Brother Go's reward was 1/10 of the underground treasures of the Panga clan. Chapter 3842. Everyone knew that the family of the former leader of the Panga clan had been annihilated. However, it was said that the treasures that the former leader had left behind were forever buried under the yellow sand. Nowadays, many people were still going to the former base of the Panga clan to search for treasures. They were still dreaming of digging out the treasures and making a fortune. No one knew that the treasures of the former leader of the Jing clan had already been taken away by Mr. Jojo in a talisman. The surviving members of the Panga clan, under the leadership of the new leader, had already gone far away to live their good lives. They wouldn't say a word. Therefore, Brother Guzzi didn't know the truth. He even went back and searched for several days, but he still couldn't find the residence of the Panga clan members. However, he couldn't accept it. His beautiful and proud little princess, who could have become the high and mighty crown princess of the Divine Land, was killed by Arbor just like that. Brother Guzzi wanted to avenge his beautiful princess, Jing Minyao. However, he felt that he wasn't strong enough. After thinking hard, he thought of going to the underground black market of Jiawei City and issuing such an order. The underground black market of Jiawei City was independent of the 3 provinces. Although it wasn't as superior as the 4 major cities, it was protected by the City of Shadows. It had always been a place where crooks mixed with honest folk and wasn't controlled by the 3 provinces. He went there to issue a mission and issued a bounty. Most of the people there were fugitives who had fled to this place to accept his mission. He only had one purpose, which was to kill Arbor. He had to let this woman know that she couldn't escape from the punishment of others after killing Miss Jing. At this point, Chamu already understood this person's thoughts very well. After tossing Brother Go, who was foaming at the mouth and twitching nonstop, onto the ground, Xiao Mu didn't even look at him. She directly summoned a dagger from her conscience and slit Brother Go's neck. Brother Guzzi didn't even have time to open his eyes before he died on the spot. Perhaps he couldn't figure out what had gone wrong even at the moment of his death. Why didn't the little girl say a word to him? Why didn't she ask him anything? Why did she search his soul and slit his neck so quickly? Looking at the other party's expressionless, paralyzed face, a faint chill rose from the hearts of the three elders. The little girl was too cold. Now that the person who issued the mission was dead, did that mean that the mission was already over? If they wanted to continue, even if they completed the mission, no one would be able to lead them to the treasure trove. Damn it! When the three old men thought of this, they all sighed in their hearts, and their hearts were filled with grief. How could such a fat piece of meat fly away just like that? The old man said with a sullen face, "The grudge has already been formed. Even if we let this girl go today, she won't let us go." With this young lady's ruthlessness and vengeance, not only would she not let them off, she would definitely beat them to death, right? This girl definitely has more than one god Powerball on her. Lock her down. The old man and his 80 shouted. The three of them attacked at the same time, using their divine senses of varying heights to lock onto Arbor in a small area. Even if Arbor wanted to use the teleportation talisman now, it would be useless. After all, her consciousness was locked down. Even if she moved, they would immediately find her through the trajectory of her movements. Among the three old men, 2 of them were level 10 divine realm cultivators. Chapter 3843. The old man in his 80s was actually an early-stage spiritual venerable realm cultivator. When he pressed down with his hand, Arbor inexplicably felt a trace of suffocation. Good heavens, as expected of someone who had stepped into the transcendent god realm. His aura was far from what an ordinary person could compare to. If it were someone else like Arbor, who had just stepped into the transcendent god realm, they definitely wouldn't be a match for these 3 old men. But who was Arbor? Although she couldn't fight the 3 old men in front of her at the same time, it was more than enough for her to escape from their hands. The 3 of them were fantasizing about locking her conscious. Did they really think that her conscious was only 50 to 60% of her spiritual energy like an ordinary person's? Arbor reached out to summon the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron from her conscious and slammed it toward one of the old men in his 60s without saying a word. The other party was shocked, completely not expecting this little stoic to have such a strange move. In the blink of an eye, the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron had already flown in front of the old man. The old man hurriedly reached out to press down, wanting to support the large cauldron that was flying over. He thought that this large cauldron was just a bit heavier than ordinary cauldrons. Unexpectedly, he was sent flying in the next second, and his back hit a tree trunk hard. The old man couldn't hold back for a moment and spat out a mouthful of blood. Arbor calmly glanced at the other party, and a holy power ball flew out from her inner world and immediately smashed toward the old man. Huh, did you think this great aunt didn't have a backup plan? Boom. After the dense holy power light exploded, all the people meditating and cultivating under the nebula instantly opened their eyes. Emol Yin abruptly stood up, and her fierce phoenix eyes looked up in the direction of the sound. Jojo was in danger. Arbor threw down a holy power ball and immediately ran away without looking back. The moment the holy power ball exploded, it blasted one of the old men in his 60s into pieces. At the same time, Arbor swiftly stuck several flying talismans on her body. After running a few steps, she instantly soared into the air and flew toward the depths of the forest. Damn it, the elder in his 80s was truly infuriated by the little stoic. He raised his head and swallowed a pill before chasing after her. His only remaining companion couldn't help but call out in a trembling voice, "Brother Gao, stop chasing." How could Gao Dong listen to his words? At this moment, his heart was filled with anger. He was actually tricked by a brat who had just entered the deity realm. Do you think you're so great just because you have the God Powerball and the Holy Powerball? You wanted to see just how many holy power orbs this little brat had on her that she could throw around like this. The other old man in his 60s was shocked. After this brother, Gao took a pill, the aura on his body rose steadily. Now, it had reached a level that he could not recognize. Late-stage spiritual elder realm? Immortal venerable realm? Or was he a late-stage immortal venerable? He did not know, but he could feel the aura on Gao Dong's body rising bit by bit, as if the saint energy had skyrocketed and could no longer control the rising rhythm. At this moment, Gao Dong's eyes also revealed a hint of carefreeness. This feeling of his cultivation realm soaring was truly too tempting. If he had known earlier, he would have asked that person for 2 more of these pills. At this moment, Arbor suddenly turned around and glanced at him with a focused gaze. The pill that person took had an overwhelming stench unique to Tianyin. Could it be that Tianyin's forces had already infiltrated Jiaowei City's underground black market? Chapter 3844. Or could it be that Tianyin had already started plotting to place some sugar-coated pills with ulterior motives in the underground black market and began to wantonly trade them? Arbor coldly turned to glance at that person. This person's aura was continuously rising. With her current cultivation, it was still too difficult for her to deal with a venerated immortal. Unless Arbor flung out 3 teleportation talismans, but no matter where she teleported to, Gao Dong's divine consciousness would lock onto her. Wherever she teleported, Gao Dong would immediately change directions and catch up to her. Seeing that the distance between them was shrinking closer and closer, Arbor expressionlessly lowered her head to glance at her palm. She abruptly tossed out that sage-grade golden talisman summoning talisman. An angry roar came from the void. It sounded like a dragon, but wasn't a dragon, like a beast, but wasn't a beast. A cloud of mist spread out behind Arbor in a few breaths' time. A sharp claw stretched out from within and abruptly tore that 60-year-old old man, who couldn't stop in time and was charging over with a face full of terror, into pieces. Gao Dong helplessly watched as one of his companions was torn apart by that thing inside the mist. His expression immediately darkened, and a furious glint condensed in his eyes. He didn't expect that the bounty order for this trip would actually cost the lives of 2 of his old brothers. If this could be tolerated, what couldn't? Today, this little girl had simply crossed his bottom line as a person. She was bound to lose her life here, no matter what tricks she could pull off. Gao Dong instantly flew up and evaded the primordial beast from afar. Although he didn't know what was inside the mist, he could tell that he was no match for the ferocious beast, even though he had already reached the peak of the immortal venerable realm, judging from the way it tore his old friend apart with its claws. However, even if he couldn't provoke it, couldn't he avoid it? As long as he circled around that primordial beast with extreme speed and charged directly behind it, that would do. No matter how fast the little stoic was, could she be faster than him, a peak venerated immortal? Today he wanted this stoic face to die, without a doubt. The instant he brushed past her, Gao Dong desperately suppressed his churning qi and blood at the risk of being suppressed by that beast's roar. He flew several steps into the air and chased after the stoic face. As soon as Xiao Mu sensed that heavy pressure assaulting her, she had already activated all the spiritual weapons in her body without any room for objection. Her opponent's palm, which was accompanied by flames, suddenly pushed her back. The little girl was sent flying a few meters away by the force of the blow. Blood trickled down from the corner of her mouth. His eyes were filled with cold mist as he lowered his head to look at the few drops of blood on the ground. Her bright eyes stirred slightly as she chanted several hand seals, and a few talisman seals appeared on her body. The tip of a sword slowly emerged from her left hand. With just a trace of it, a majestic and mighty force swept over, instantly pressing down on Gao Dong, who wanted to fly forward. His footsteps tilted slightly, and his body seemed to be pressed down heavily. Xiao Mu's eyes flickered with an abnormal luster. She gazed at the sword in her hand that was emerging piece by piece, and her heart was filled with a deep sense of satisfaction. "Come out, my friend, come out, come out. Kill this bastard who dared to hurt me. Send him to hell." "Little treasure," a familiar voice caused Arbor, who was in the middle of drawing her sword, to stiffen. "How dare you, old thief!" A stern shout, accompanied by a projection, suddenly appeared above the entire Phoenix Grove. Chapter 3845. At the same time, Emolien, Duan Yu, and the others, who were sprinting toward Arbor, seemed to be enveloped by a heavy pressure at the same time. Their footsteps were so heavy that they could barely lift them up. Mu Xingqian had no choice but to halt his steps and look up at the sky in astonishment. He saw an apparition that blotted out the sky above Phoenix Grove. A heavy pressure swept over, causing everyone in Phoenix Grove to fall to the ground uncontrollably, unable to move at all. Time seemed to come to a standstill, and everyone inexplicably held their breaths. For a moment, the entire Phoenix Grove was so quiet that only the faint sound of the wind could be heard. Even the chirping of birds and cicadas instantly ceased. Arbor's small hand that was pulling out the Fushi greatsword trembled slightly, and a trace of guilt inexplicably flitted across her heart. Strange, why was it that every time she wanted to pull out the sword to play with it, she would summon Master, who was far away in the alternate dimension, over? The little fellow blinked with an obedient expression and quickly stopped pulling out the sword. She retracted her small hand into her sleeve and looked up at the apparition pressing down on Phoenix Grove. At this time, Gao Dong, who bore the brunt of the pressure and was paralyzed on the ground, couldn't make a sound at all. Even breathing felt abnormally extravagant and extremely difficult for him. Arbor squatted beside this big shot who ascended to the venerable immortal realm after taking the medicine. She placed her small hands on her knees with an obedient expression. Xian Huang's apparition descended from the sky and was enveloped by a layer of faint black mist, but that graceful figure and extremely beautiful appearance could still be clearly distinguished. Our dear Qiao Mu was very obedient. She had an instinctive premonition that if she didn't behave obediently in front of Master, she might be out of luck later. Xian Huang curled her lips, and the indistinct black figure appeared in front of the little girl. She raised her hand and patted her head. Xiao Bao, don't you remember what I told you? Master said before your soul reintegrates, you must remember not to use this Fushi greatsword. The little crown princess nodded her small head repeatedly. Unexpectedly, Xian Huang flicked her forehead, and she instantly reached out to cover her small head. Her round eyes moved. Your soul exploded before, and your soul fragments were split into 5 different places. Xian Huang paused and lowered her head to look at her little disciple. Although I've taken back one of them, there are still 4 strands of soul remembrance that you need to take back. Arbor nodded in understanding. I can sense that there are 2 parts of your soul in this forest. 2? Arbor's eyes suddenly lit up, and his little ears couldn't help twitching. Did this mean that there were 2 fragments of her soul in the Phoenixwood Forest? He didn't know where it was or how to find it. Xian Huang saw that the little fellow was puzzled, so she helplessly raised her hand and touched her head. You can feel it, Xiao Bao. As long as you calm down and use your divine sense to sense it, you will definitely be able to sense its location. This child probably had a knot in his heart about his own soul explosion, so he had never truly felt the places where her soul had fallen. Perhaps she still subconsciously felt repulsed by those soul wills. Otherwise, if she approached the vicinity of the soul wills, she should have immediately felt it. Arbor obediently replied with a no. Clearly, her master had long been used to her way of killing a conversation with just 3 sentences. She nodded indifferently and continued. Only after collecting these soul wills can you use the Fushi greatsword. Do you remember? Chapter 3846. Sir Jojo still nodded obediently, indicating that he understood. Xian Huang's eyes rippled with a faint smile. She stretched out a finger and said softly, "Close your eyes." Xiao Mu obediently closed her eyes, only to feel an icy finger tapping the center of her forehead. A powerful divine will then permeate it into her divine sense, alerting all the defensive divine artifacts in her divine sense. The golden talisman Jade Tome made a long buzzing sound, but it was quickly suppressed by the strong divine thought. Little treasure, this is the essence of the space-time profound that your martial uncle and I have studied for many years. Now, I will pass it to you. You can comprehend it yourself when you are free. You are a child with great fortune. No matter where you go, You must let me and your martial uncle rest assured. Do you understand? Sir Jojo thought to himself. I am very obedient. Of course, I will not let you worry. Arbor opened his eyes and felt that there was a heavy silver ball in his hand. Xian Huang lovingly touched his little disciple's head. There's a part of the space-time power here. Before you comprehend the space-time profound, you can draw a part of it and use it at any time. Protect yourself well, good child. Remember to be obedient. Master, when will you and martial uncle come to see me again? Arbor was anxious and quickly asked. We will meet. Xian Huang sighed softly. Tian Dao, that old thing is coming. I will go and have a good chat with it. Remember my words. Do not rashly use the Fushi sword again. As for him, after saying that, Xian Huang's cold gaze swept over to Gao Dong, who was sitting paralyzed and pretending to be dead. Did he really think that he would not have to die by pretending to be dead? He actually forced her precious disciple to vomit blood and draw the Fushi sword. He really had guts. Old thief Wang Liang, you bullied the younger generation at your age. Death is not to be regretted. Gao Dong's whole body trembled, and he could not help but tremble. He fiercely shrank his body and shouted, Say, Senior, spare my life. Say, Senior. Spare, a colorless space as thin as a cicada's wing suddenly wrapped around his body. An ice-cold chill inexplicably sprung up from the bottom of Gao Dong's feet, causing him to involuntarily shiver. Arbor turned his head and saw that his master's phantom in the void had already retreated, and the entire Phoenix Grove had returned to its original tranquility. She pouted and felt a little melancholy in her heart. The chirping of birds rang out once again. It was as if the entire world had suddenly come alive. Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others hurried to Qiao Mu's side as fast as they could, and they just so happened to see Gao Dong, who was trapped inside a square transparent barrier. His entire body was stiff and upright, and his expression was warped. He was soundlessly crushed into pieces by a strange energy fluctuation, dissipating before them with a bang. Everyone's expression changed. Mata opened his mouth, but he couldn't make a sound. The scene just now was simply too shocking. What kind of power is this? Eldest young Sir Qin also sucked in a cold breath, and his gaze flickered as he looked at Arbor, who was sitting at the side with an obedient expression. Why did he feel that this child was a little too obedient now? The little fellow was sitting right next to the dissipated Gao Dong with her hands on her knees, and her tiny body was ramrod straight. Her expressionless little face carried the sign of facial paralysis. If it were not for the fact that her gaze would occasionally glance at them, everyone would really think that this little thing had entered a meditative state to cultivate again. Chapter 38:47. Cough, cough. Everyone couldn't help but look at her exasperatedly. The little girl was accustomed to using an expressionless face to conceal her mental breakdown. She might be sitting there obediently now, but something big must have happened earlier. She just couldn't be bothered to tell them. Mo Lien quickly walked up and reached out to pull his wife up from the tree. When the little girl saw this, she quickly hopped up from the ground and looked at him calmly. Let's go. Don't you think you should tell everyone what happened just now? Jojo, did a mighty figure pass by here earlier? Qin Jiao asked in confusion. No, Arbor replied expressionlessly. Everyone couldn't resist throwing this word at her. Then who was the projection above Phoenix Grove? Ollie couldn't resist rolling his eyes and also asked, It can't be that all of our eyes are playing tricks on us, right? When that projection's aura pressed down, everyone was pressed to the ground and couldn't walk near you at all. What projection? Arbor glanced at him indifferently with a stoic expression that said, I can't be bothered to talk to you. Mo Lien couldn't resist twitching his mouth. He held his wifey's hand and said while suppressing his laughter, Jojo, let's move together. Sir Jojo immediately pulled her hand out of his and expressionlessly said, We're not on the same team. Puffed. Duan Yu couldn't resist laughing out loud. Damn, this little girl was too funny. Looking at her serious expression and Mo Lien's pitiful appearance next to her, puffed, they really couldn't hold back their laughter. Jojo, you're too heartless. My heart hurts when you say this. Mo Lien looked pitiful. The little girl nodded and patted him. You'd better stay away from me. Don't think that you can snatch my identity tablet and ruby just because I'm alone now. If I don't recognize my family, I won't even recognize myself. Everyone, Mu Xingqian was speechless. We won't steal your identity card. Don't worry. We don't want to continue suffering in the future. When they were training in the Phoenix Forest, they were courting death and snatcher things. How are they going to live in the future? It's not like I won't be able to live a good life after I leave. Ah, pooey. Arbor looked at them expressionlessly. As long as you understand. She waved her hand and was about to bid farewell to everyone. She still had to enter the forest to continue looking for her companions, Duanmu Qing and the others. I don't have time to waste with these people. Mo Lin tugged at her sleeve and looked at her pitifully. Jojo, you said earlier that you would meet up with us after luring the 5 spirits away. Arbor couldn't wait to jump into the pit. Yes, she had just said that it was an instinctive reaction, wasn't it? When she saw Mo Lin and Duan Yu, she instinctively wanted to leave with them. Now that she had sobered up and thought about it, bah, I'm not in the same team as them. Why should I leave? Of course I won't leave with them. Be careful. Arbor waved her small fists and glared menacingly at eldest young Sir Qin's group, whose mouths were twitching. Afterwards, she turned around and broke into a run towards another part of the forest, truly parting ways with Mo Lin and the rest. Chapter 38-48. Duan Yu couldn't resist the urge to burst into laughter. He turned to look at Mo Lin's hopeless expression and gloated, "You can't keep her either. Ha 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 ha." Mo Lin, this fool, also couldn't keep Sir Jojo. What a joke. Omega Katoku's eyes flickered. When she led her team past Mo Lin's group, she glanced at Mo Lin and sneered. When Mo Lin looked over at him, that troop had already left his side. He was so angry that his teeth hurt and his heart stifled. His head throbbed, and his handsome face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Mu Xingqian's mouth twitched, and he patted Mo Lin's shoulder sympathetically. Don't worry, Jojo still wants you. It's just that the competition hasn't ended yet, so she simply thinks that we aren't on the same side as her and are all her potential competitors and enemies puffed. When he said this, even he couldn't resist laughing. Fuck, he had to think of a way to team up with Jojo in the future. Otherwise, it would be too heart-wrenching. If he didn't team up with the little lady, he would be despised by her all the time. He simply couldn't live like this. Prince Mo was already very regretful. All right, but Mu Xingqian and the others were still making sarcastic remarks beside him. If he had known earlier, he would have stayed in the same team as his little ancestor no matter what. He definitely wouldn't have given up such an important team spot to Qi Xianxian and her group. Duan Yu blinked and consoled with a grin. Don't worry, even if we don't rob Jojo, we can still rob others. From the looks of it, the 1,700-plus teams from the Royal Academy should have all entered the forest. We should act now. Mo Lin looked like she had nothing left to live for and was still immersed in the little lady's disdainful gaze. On the other side, Omega Katoku's group was silently walking into the forest. The eldest young sir followed beside him and said with a grin, "Second brother, did you notice?" The little girl deliberately changed the topic and didn't want to talk to us about the shadow that appeared in the sky above the Phoenix Forest. A member of the Qin clan added, "I don't know who that person is, but his aura actually enveloped the entire sky above the Phoenixwood Forest, making people unable to even think of resisting. Also, did you see that? What kind of container was that old man imprisoned in? Shattering into pieces within minutes? Not a vessel." Eldest young Sir Qin shook his head mildly and said with a smile, "It does seem a bit like the power of the void. It's as if I'm trapped in a transparent space and can be crushed into pieces at any moment." Hearing this, everyone was shocked to realize that it was indeed as the eldest young master had said. The old man seemed to have been torn to pieces by the power of space, completely unable to resist. A powerful spatial expert? Qin Jiao exclaimed in a low voice. In the entire 3 continents, he had never heard of anyone who could control the power of space. Even the 3 powers that transcended the 5 spirits completely didn't include the power of space. All right? Although the power of void annihilation achieved the same result as the power of space through different means, its main purpose wasn't to shatter the void, but to generate void fire. It was fundamentally different from the power of space. Shinjio took a deep breath. If he was saying if that big shot who grasped the power of space was really related to JoJo, then who would dare to provoke this stoic-faced little lady in the entire 3 continents? A China State disciple exhaled lightly. Marvelous. Chapter 3849. Moreover, Lady JoJo abandoned Emolien, Duan Yu, and the others and rushed into Phoenix Forest alone to search for Duanmu Qing, Qi Xinxian, and the others. The more she thought about it, the guiltier she felt. Lady JoJo abandoned hubby just like that. Would hubby cry? But Darling's heart was bitter, so she could only hold it in. Emolien and the others must have recording talisman matrices around them right now. If she was in the same team as them, according to the mentor's troublesome nature, they would definitely accuse her of cheating at the last minute. How could that do? She was someone who even had the heart of a 10,000-year-old phoenix tree, so she couldn't casually cause any trouble. What was a phoenix flower worth? She even brought the 10,000-year-old phoenix tree back home, so she could have as many flowers as she wanted in the future. When she thought of this, Lady JoJo's mood improved, so she took out the extremely thick silver ball that Master left for her and studied it. She held it in her hand and immersed her divine perception inside. She saw a vast ocean with 2 streaks of power that resembled the Milky Way slowly rippling inside this small silver ball like ribbons. Arbor's eyes lit up when she absorbed one of the streaks of power. She suddenly disappeared from where she stood, and when she reappeared, she was already in the center of the forest 1.5 kilometers away. This was the space-time power that Master left behind. She said that it was a power that she could use before she comprehended the profundity of space-time. She absorbed less than 1/10,000th of the space-time power that resembled the Milky Way just now. She felt that she could use it continuously for about 6 hours if she stored it in her body. The little fellow's eyes were sparkling, and she also absorbed a small bit of the power of time to test it out. As she waved her small hand, the fluttering leaves in the surroundings suddenly stopped moving. Time froze, although it only froze for a few seconds before the leaves started falling again. If this happened during a battle, it would suddenly stop moving for several seconds. Haha! Lady JoJo was a bit happy. She then used the power of space that existed in her body to continuously move around Phoenix Forest. Occasionally, she would appear beside a Royal Academy team, and before they could react, she would immediately beat them up with her small fists and snatch their rubies before scampering away. Fuck. Everyone was about to explode. All right? Where did this guy come from? Why did he suddenly appear beside you and attack you without saying anything? The funniest thing was that there was an unlucky team that was robbed twice by Sir JoJo. When Sir JoJo appeared beside them for the 3rd time, the captain hurriedly waved his hand and said, Don't fight. You already beat us up half an hour ago. We'll leave the rubies to you. Crown Princess, do you want an identity card? Hand it over. Hand it over. We'll hand over everything. Arbor, why didn't they say so earlier? You made her waste her time. Who wants your identity cards? She just wants to collect points. With a flash of light, the little fellow quickly moved away from them. The unlucky team members all heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on the ground. Anyone who was robbed 3 times in a row would feel hopeless. Okay, hand over the ruby. A group of 7 ran down from a small alley and surrounded them with swords and sabers in their hands. The captain really wanted to cry. What kind of bad luck did their team have? They had an unreliable alchemist, and until now, he still hadn't been able to break the seal on them. Chapter 3850. For the next few days, they had been living in the open in the Phoenix Forest, living a miserable life. After being robbed 4 times in a row, they no longer had any red gemstones to hand over. Sob, sob, sob. He felt that his team was probably the most pitiful among all the teams in the royal school. One of the female students in the team cried out, Just now the Crown Princess robbed us 3 times, and we've already handed over all our red gemstones. We don't have any red gemstones left. Take your identity badges. Following that, a dang sound was heard as the female student threw her identity badges onto the ground. With a hopeless expression, she said, "Let's go back to the school, leader." Sob, sob, sob. It was too torturous. If this carried on, she was going to go crazy. Life without a cultivation base was really hard. She didn't want to be an ordinary person. The life of an ordinary person was really too hard. Little Fatty looked at them with a dumbfounded expression. Chi Xuan's eyes lit up and asked anxiously, "The Crown Princess? You guys really saw the Crown Princess? Where's she now?" "Don't listen to their nonsense," Duan Mu Qing said coldly. "Even if the Crown Princess was here to rob, there's no reason for her to rob them 3 times. The Crown Princess wasn't stupid. Robbing them once and taking away the red gemstones was enough. Robbing them 3 times in a row, what the hell was that?" Leader said with a hopeless expression. "You guys don't have to believe it. The Crown Princess did rob us 3 times. You can look at the recording screen when you go back. The Crown Princess comes and goes without a trace. She mysteriously appeared in front of you and attacked you without saying a word. She didn't even give us a chance to refute. Why did they feel like crying when they thought of this?" Little Fatty pursed his lips and looked at them sympathetically. He then exchanged glances with Duan Mu and the rest. They guessed that the little Crown Princess, this troublemaker, had used something like a teleportation talisman to hide in the forest and rob the students passing by. Which direction did she go? The captain casually pointed to the south. It was only after Duan Mu Qing ran off with his teammates that he faintly sighed. "Don't hold too much hope. Your Crown Prince Consort is a weirdo. Don't think that she's really waiting for you in the south." The little Crown Princess's figure suddenly flashed, and she stood on a branch of a tree. She happily looked at the remaining spatial energy in her body. After continuously using it for more than 2 hours, she still had at least half of the spatial energy left for her to squander. It was so much fun. The little fellow couldn't help but clap his little hands. Then, he heard a woman's laughter drifting into his ears. "Little big brother, TSK, you look a little too pitiful. Who did this to you? Let me help you, okay?" That feminine voice caused a layer of tiny goosebumps to appear on Arbor's arms for no reason. Looking down the tree from the corner of her eyes, she saw that under a camphor tree not far away, a woman dressed in revealing black was half-squatting there. Her fingers were like snakes caressing the handsome side of a person in front of her. Looking down from where she was, she could see that person's thin lips were tightly pursed with a pained expression on his face. It was actually someone familiar. Arbor blinked, and his gaze landed on that man's limbs. His mood instantly seemed to be covered by dark clouds, and his eyes darkened. His limbs were all broken. Was this woman in front of him the one who did it? She could do whatever she wanted just for her own selfish desires. Chapter 38:51. Just as Arbor was about to descend, a ball of black fog suddenly floated to her side and rubbed against the back of her neck. It felt rather cold. The little fellow shrunk her neck and turned her head to look. She saw a small claw reaching out from the fog and trying to grab a strand of her hair. Arbor was curious. She reached out her white and tender hand and shook the little claw. "I'm fine." She raised her hand and touched the ball of black fog. She could feel that this fellow's feelings were very complicated and mixed with a hint of displeasure. Could it be that it was apologizing to her? Because it didn't protect her properly just now and let her take old man Gao Dong's attack and spit out blood? Arbor tried to use her divine sense to communicate with this primordial beast. "Why must you be wrapped in this black fog?" Sir Jojo was still somewhat curious. "Don't you want to come out and see me?" She could feel that this fellow in front of her was a little resistant to seeing people. But why? Arbor reached out and reached into the black fog. She casually felt around. "Hongming, when are you going back this time? If you don't come out and see me now, you won't have another chance." Who knew if she would be able to summon it again next time? This beast was very powerful. She used a sacred-grade golden talisman to summon it here. She estimated that it could only stay here for half a day. It would still go back. As for where this primordial beast came from, Arbor wasn't sure. It could be the holy region, or it could be the border of the wilderness. This Hongmeng seemed to be conflicted for a long time. Then it reluctantly poked its little head out of the black fog. It's furry. Arbor's eyes instantly widened. She raised her hand and instinctively touched Hongmeng's little head. Wasn't this fellow a little too cute? Its head was like a little bear's, and its belly was round. It sat there, swinging its two short little legs. A pair of black eyes were looking at her, and they were very quick-witted. The most conspicuous part of its forehead was the word summon, faintly appearing between the white fur. Arbor had thought that this vicious beast would be the type that looked mighty and domineering. Back then, when he saw it tear out a claw from the black fog, he thought that it was a ferocious beast with a head of copper and arms of iron. However, when he saw it, he was immediately discouraged. It's not even as sturdy as a snow leopard. Sir Jojo looked at him expressionlessly, thinking to himself that it was no wonder that every time this guy appeared, he would always be so mysterious, shrouded in a cloud of black fog, and never dared to show his face. If others knew that the primordial beast was actually such a cute thing, wouldn't they laugh their heads off? Since it was so cute, it could only hide in the black fog and not see anyone. The primordial beast didn't know why the little Master Silver's attitude towards it had suddenly changed 180 degrees. Could it be that his little Master Silver was still angry at him for failing to protect her? The primordial beast rolled over and stood up. It walked in the air with its short legs and hopped towards Arbor. Arbor said expressionlessly, "You'd better go back into your black fog. This way, it would appear more mighty and domineering. It would also make her feel less annoyed, Master's silver heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea. The primordial beast expressed that it didn't understand. If Chio, Little Water, and Little Earth were here, they would definitely mock this fellow and solemnly warn it. Master doesn't like cute things. Chapter 3852. After being delayed by this primordial chaos on the treetop, by the time Xiao Mu looked down again, there were already no traces of that man and woman in her sight. They moved them away so quickly. Arbor frowned slightly. She jumped down from the branch and landed lightly on the ground. Stepping on the soft soil beneath her feet, Xiao Mu circulated her divine conscious and swiftly spread it out in all directions. Although she didn't like the people from the Qin estate, seeing that person's arms and legs were all broken, she felt a trace of sympathy for them. Thus, she decided to lend him a hand. To the current Arbor, helping people was really just a matter of lifting a finger. Her divine sense was extremely powerful. It didn't take long for her to discover the figures of that woman and the zither cultivator in front of a small cave 100 meters to the west. He sure ran fast. Xiao Mu narrowed her indifferent eyes and disappeared from her spot in a flash. After more than 2 hours of experimentation, Arbor was now able to control the power of space in her body and accurately arrive at her destination within 5 kilometers. Thus, Arbor arrived in front of the cave in a mere breath's time. The sound of thunder echoed in her ears. Arbor expressionlessly raised her head to look at the dark sky. She saw dark clouds looming over her and thunder rumbling. It looked like a thunderstorm was about to descend. Seeing that this was a very normal natural occurrence, Arbor lowered her head and took out an oil paper umbrella from her inner world. As soon as she opened the umbrella cover, the torrential rain fell as scheduled. "It's really heavy," Arbor thought to herself. On such a stormy night, who would have thought that the lofty 5th young master of the Qin estate would actually be suffering such torment in such a simple and crude cave? Arbor stepped on the puddles of water in a flash and slowly arrived at the entrance of the cave. A woman's playful laughter came from inside. It was as soft as a venomous snake, causing one to be unable to help but feel disgusted. What a shameless woman. Not only was she brazen, she even broke someone else's arms and legs for her own pleasure. She deserved to die. Arbor's small face was incomparably cold as she stepped on the puddles of water and entered the cave. The cave was extremely dark. Only sporadic flames could be seen burning under a small, crude stove made of stones. There was a small stew pot on top of the stone stove, and he didn't know what was being stewed inside. A faint wisp of smoke was drifting over. The little girl sniffed and immediately revealed a look of disgust. What a shameless woman. She dared to stew this kind of salty medicine just to satisfy her own selfish desires. The little girl quickly walked over and kicked the woman's back without saying a word. Every kick was accurate, and the woman immediately rolled towards the corner of the wall, her big head fiercely knocking against the wall. It wasn't that Meng Meio's cultivation was weak, but the main thing was that she really didn't expect that in such terrible weather, in such a remote cave in Phoenixwood Forest, they would actually be inexplicably attacked. She was completely defenseless. She was secretly happy that she had picked up a handsome man along the way. She thought that she was really blessed and could get anything she wanted. He planned to finish drinking the nourishing soup and then go find this beauty to do some good deeds. Thinking of this, his heart was very happy. Who would have thought that someone would suddenly interrupt him? Too deceitful, truly too deceitful. Her pot of all-nourishing soup was also kicked to the ground by a little girl with a stoic face. "Ah!" Meng Meiyu screamed. Chapter 38:53. She abruptly turned around and glared unwaveringly at the stoic-faced girl with a pair of gloomy eyes. She harshly rebuked. "Where did this damn girl come from? You actually dared to spoil the all-nourishment soup that I painstakingly refined with great difficulty?" She was simply audacious to the extreme. Meng Meiyu was about to explode from anger at Arbor, especially when she saw the other party's tranquil little face. She couldn't help but ridicule her from the bottom of her heart. Which family did this girl come from? She dared to barge in so boldly and interrupt her fun, yet she didn't show the slightest bit of guilt. This vice cult master Meng glared at Arbor in a bad mood and asked coldly, "Who are you?" "You? You don't deserve to know my name." Arbor took a step forward and flung out a vine whip without a second word. The vine whip scuttled out with a whoosh and whipped at Meng Meiyu's wrist with lightning speed, tightly binding her left wrist. Meng Meiyu was incessantly enraged. She lightly shook her wrist and made a wriggling snake pose. She coldly glared at the little stoic in front of her and said gloomily, "Don't blame me for being merciless since you're courting death." This was truly a case of refusing to take the path to heaven and barging into the doorless hell. She didn't even go out and ask around. Was she, Meng Meiyu, someone who would suffer losses? Who in the entire demonic cult dared to provoke Vice Cult Master Meng? Who didn't know that Vice Cult Master Meng's reputation was widespread? This little girl, who only had a faintly discernible wisp of spiritual energy fluctuation all over her body, she dared to meddle in Vice Cult Master Meng's business? Ha ha ha. This was truly hilarious. Arbor narrowed his eyes and coldly gazed at this girl whose wrist was shaking like a snake. Suddenly, he heard a shrill hiss from that girl's mouth, and a poisonous glint shot out of her eyes. Her originally normal hand extended several dozen meters forward like a withered branch. She didn't pause at all and directly reached in front of Arbor. Just as that withered branch-like hand was about to grip Arbor's neck, a cold glint of light flashed across his eyes. Meng Meiyu suddenly let out a startled hiss. Half of the withered branch on her left arm was chopped off by Arbor's startled swan dagger. Yes, cut. Meng Meiyu's branch-like arm retracted and returned to its original state. The broken branch that had fallen to the ground also reverted back to the shape of a finger. Bastard! Meng Meiyu covered her crippled hand and glared at Arbor. Something seemed to be surging out from the depths of her eyes. Ha! Sir Jojo glanced at her. It's fused with the snakewood. As a demonic body master, Vice Sect Master Meng was also a rank 13 Fire Great Spirit Master. Logically speaking, his strength should be quite good. However, this was only true for other people. Against Charles, he really had no chance of winning. Arbor was now a Grade 1 God-tier Master. Although his divine sense was still at Grade 6, it wasn't far from Grade 7. As for the Divine Ruins realm, it had yet to open. The main reason was that the star field was still evolving. She reckoned that after she successfully transitioned from the star domain to the divine domain, the spiritual ruin realm in her body would also be able to take a step towards the divine ruin realm. Even if her current advancement was a bit incomplete and not fully mature, it was still more than enough to deal with this grade 13 Great Spirit Master in front of her. Moreover, the startled swan dagger had long been promoted to a divine artifact. The power of its dagger was naturally not something Meng Mei could block. Chapter 3854. Arbor was too lazy to talk to this woman. How could she be happy to talk to such a shameless woman? In order to make the man listen to her and enjoy a moment of pleasure, she actually crippled his arms and legs? What kind of operation was this? Was this something a human could do? Obviously not. So seeing Arbor take 2 steps forward, Meng Meio's expression changed instantly. She subconsciously stepped back and looked at her with vigilance. What are you trying to do? I'm warning you. Don't come any closer. Meng Meiyu screamed. She covered her injured finger and took a few steps back. Suddenly, she turned around and saw the man lying motionless on the ground with his eyes closed. Meng Meiyu suddenly shouted at Arbor. Don't you want this man? Fine. I'll give him to you. Miss, we've only met by chance. We'll mind our own business. You don't have to fight with me over a man. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. Do you think everyone is as dirty as you? She still wanted this man? Tui, what did she want him for? Wasting food is a waste of energy. She was just touched. As for the rest, Sir Jojo felt that this woman in front of him was thinking too much. Meng Meiyu saw Arbor approaching her and quickly turned around. She wanted to reach out and grab the man's neck. She wanted to hold him in her hand and use him to threaten Arbor. However, before her fingers could touch the man's neck, she was swept away by a strong force. Meng Meiyu hit the stone wall heavily. She spat out a mouthful of blood and rolled on the ground. She frowned in horror and shrank back inch by inch like a worm. When you broke his arms and legs, you didn't think you would end up like this, did you? Arbor said coldly. Meng Meiyu hurriedly refuted. No, it's not like that. I was separated from my companions and accidentally found this little brother in the forest. I found him, and he was already like this. Meng Meiyu hurriedly explained. And if I hadn't appeared in time and killed the 2 wild wolves in front of him, he would have been eaten up by the wolves. Arbor was stunned. He recalled the startled swan dagger that was suspended in the air and sized up the woman. Although she was dressed impudently, there was a hint of wickedness in her eyes. However, his expression when he spoke was extremely serious, and it didn't seem like he was lying. Oh, Arbor glanced at her indifferently and looked at her carefully for a long time before walking towards the man lying on the ground. She squatted beside him and grabbed his cold wrist. He could clearly feel the other party's body shrink back, and fear flashed in the other party's empty eyes that had no will to live. He wanted to retract his hand, but how could a good-for-nothing like him, who had no cultivation, retract his hand when Sir Jojo was so strong? After taking his pulse, Chiao Mu creased her brows. It seemed that the filthy woman wasn't lying. This injury seemed to have been there for a day or 2. The external injuries were very obvious. Other than the 4 limbs that had been cruelly used, there were indeed traces of being bitten and bandaged by wild wolves on his arm. When Arbor looked back, he saw that Meng Meiyu had already crawled to the door like a crawling worm. Seeing her cold gaze, Meng Meiyu was so scared that she peed her pants. She didn't care if it was raining cats and dogs outside and rolled out of the cave. Chapter 3855. She even let out a series of screams. Miss, I'll scram right now, scram. I don't dare to disturb you anymore. She forgot to say the last, probably because there was a steep slope near the cave, and she rolled all the way out of the door. Arbor glanced back coldly, intent on giving her a hard time. He kicked up that half-pot of all-aspect nourishment soup on the ground and directly kicked it over that fellow's head. Meng Meiyu was rolling down the steep slope. Now that the pot of soup covered her head, the rainwater mixed with the medicinal liquid splashed down, wetting her eyes, nose, and mouth. She also wailed and continued rolling down the steep slope. This fellow landed on the ground with a thud, and the icy rainwater splashed all over her body, but she still couldn't stop the fire in her heart. It was clearly just a little bit of the all-aspect nourishment soup. How could it be so unbearable? This medicine had been improved by someone? Meng Mayo's eyes widened in horror. After Arbor sent Meng Mayo away, he lowered his head to look at little Fifth Chin, whose eyes were tightly shut and complexion incomparably pale. She didn't know what to say about him. Every time she saw this person, he seemed to be in a very wretched state. She remembered that when the countdown was 100 hours, she had even run into his team. At that time, he was beside the other two Chin family members, and he still looked fine. Why was it that in a mere 3 days, after she made a trip to the Phoenix clan's dwelling and advanced in rank, he had become so wretched? Who could be so heavy-handed to a member of the Chin estate? Arbor couldn't figure it out, no matter how he thought about it. Even eldest Chin's Omega Katoku was in this Phoenix Wood forest. If they dared to attack Fifth Chin like this, weren't they afraid of being killed by eldest Chin's Omega Katoku? Arbor put down the Chin Shio's wrist, and that fellow subconsciously shrank back. His eyes were still tightly shut, as if he didn't need to face everything in the outside world as long as he kept his eyes tightly shut. She really had the mentality of an ostrich. Xiaomu rolled her eyes and rumbled as she took out some bottles and jars from her inner world. After rummaging through them, she took out a small bottle and poured out a pill from it. Bone Sculpting Divine Pill. He remembered that when he was in the Shuntian Prefecture, a student from the Dawnlight Academy was injured by a flock of birds in the environment. All the bones in his body were shattered. If he had this kind of bone-molding divine pill, he wouldn't have had to swallow the poison and rush to the Yellow Springs. It was a pity that she didn't have a 4-star at that time, so she didn't have so many strange medicinal herbs. She couldn't make the bone sculpting divine pill. She had always kept this matter in her heart, although it was not to the extent that the Sacred Heart would feel sad or anything. She would definitely feel regretful. After all, such a young life had fallen in front of her. After the opening of 4-star, whenever she had the chance, she would make all the pills she could and save them. She was just like that. She could be indifferent and ignore the laws, but there were always some things that she was willing to try to do, and she didn't need anything in return. The Zither cultivator's injury was much lighter than that of the student from the Changwang Academy. Therefore, as long as he consumed the bone-molding divine pill, he should be able to recover in no time. It could even be said that using the bone-molding divine pill on the current Chin Shio was really a bit like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Arbor saw that this fellow was still like an ostrich with his eyes shut, looking like he didn't want to hear or see anything outside. She rolled her eyes and didn't waste any more words with him. She directly pried open his tightly pursed lips and violently slapped that bone-molding divine pill into his mouth. Chapter 3856. The divine rank pill melted in her mouth and completely didn't require her to expend any more effort. The Zither cultivator's long eyelashes trembled, and he finally couldn't resist abruptly opening his eyes. In the depths of that pair of pitch-black eyes that resembled stars, 2 weak pools of water rippled faintly. He was extremely similar to a startled wolf cub, and his eyes carried a trace of bewilderment, unease, and indescribable fear. Arbor chuckled, but her expression didn't change at all. It was as if that chuckle came from someone else's mouth. The Zither cultivator had actually recognized Arbor's voice long ago. After all, this little stoic's chilly yet somewhat adorable voice was truly too easy to recognize. He didn't know what to say, so he looked at her blankly for a moment after opening his eyes. If you counted that time at the Weishi Corridor workshop when she treated the 8 types of medicinal powders in his body, then this was the 3rd time she had saved his life. This was already the 3rd time she had saved him. Speaking of which, the two of them really had an ill-fated relationship that couldn't be cut off. Bone-molding divine pills cost 10 million spirit coins each. Remember to return them to me after you return. Arbor expressionlessly threw him this sentence before standing up and walking to the side. Money again. A trace of light finally returned to 5th young Master Chin's bewildered eyes. His mind finally cleared up a bit, and he turned his head to look in the little lady's direction. She would charge him a large sum of money every time she treated his illness. Since she loved money so much, then why did she have to restrain herself from accepting those precious gems, paintings, and various rare medicinal herbs he sent last time, ultimately letting him burn them to the ground? Seeing her calmly squatting on the side and fiddling with the stone stove that she had kicked over just now, the fifth young master couldn't help but open his mouth. His voice was so hoarse that even he himself was slightly surprised. You. Arbor took out her family's clean small soup pot from her inner world and stewed a small pot of mushroom stew for herself. She turned around to glance at that man and expressionlessly said, "If you want to eat, add another 100,000 spirit coins." Fifth young Master Chin struggled to sit up. He fumbled around his waist and took out a spirit coin card, handing it over with an unsightly expression. Only after moving did he shockingly discover that he could actually move his limbs. What kind of miraculous pill did the little stoic feed him for the effects to be this fast? Fifth young Master Chin was somewhat astonished, and he looked towards the stoic face. However, the little stoic wasn't surprised at all. With the injuries on his body, it was already very slow for him to be able to move. This meant that this guy's body was too weak. Last time, I said that I would give you the dragon tendon bone nourishing pill, but you didn't want it. If you had eaten the dragon tendon bone repairing pill, would you be so weak now? At least my body will become stronger first, and I'll be able to escape faster in the future. Fifth young Sir Chin glared angrily at him as he unhurriedly took that spirit coin card from his hand. "Is it enough?" Arbor asked. He glanced at him calmly. "We don't accept credit." Fifth young Master Chin felt that even if he were a corpse, he would probably explode and come back to life in the stoic face's fury. Arbor walked to the entrance of the cave and looked around. His expression was a little conflicted as he frowned. "Sigh, the rain is really annoying. It seems that I can only stay here for the night." Why you dislike me so much?" Fifth young Master Chin still couldn't hold back the question in his heart and asked. In the past, he thought that she looked down on people without any cultivation. But ever since they met at the Mu Estate's entrance. Chapter 38:57. The Zither cultivator discovered from the bottom of his heart that this little stoic didn't even disdain those lowly beggars who didn't have any cultivation. She had even lent them a helping hand. For the sake of these beggars, the little stoic didn't hesitate to teach some aristocratic young masters and misses a lesson. As a result, the Zither Shio couldn't understand this at all. From this incident, it was enough to prove that the little stoic probably wasn't such a superficial person who insisted on using a person's cultivation to determine their depth. Could it be that he couldn't compare to those dirty beggars? They were both people without any cultivation. So why was she so kind-hearted as to help those beggars without any compensation, but when facing him, she had to haggle over every ounce with him? He was a calm young master with excellent self-restraint. But every time he was angered to the brink of exploding by this stoic face, he would toss all of his good self-restraint to the back of his mind. Arbor glanced askance at him, not wanting to answer this question. Could she tell him that it was because she didn't want this guy to owe her a favor, so she had to settle the bill with him? She couldn't be bothered to explain. "There's 20 million in the spirit coin card," the Zither Shio said coldly. Arbor was taken aback. She uttered an "oh," and expressionlessly turned her head to look at that person. She was a bit rueful in her heart. Although this fifth young master was physically weak in all aspects, she really didn't expect him to be such a rich person. Since she accepted his money, the little fellow didn't have any psychological burden in doing things. In any case, it was a matter of settling the bill. She didn't want this Zither Shio to owe her a favor and have a chance to bicker with her in the future. "I'll give you the change later." Arbor handed him a small bowl of holy rice and half of the mushroom stew. "No need," fifth young Master Chin said apathetically. This bit of money really wasn't much to him, but for some reason, there was a stifling anger in his heart that he couldn't vent. "That won't do." The little lady was still very principled. "Since we agreed on 10 million, then I won't charge you a dime more." If she charged him a dime more, wouldn't she be the one owing him a favor? Haha, was Sir Jojo's favor that easy to obtain? Dream on. Arbor squatted by the side, holding a bowl of holy rice in his small hands. He picked up the stewed meat in the pot with his chopsticks and took a bite. He couldn't help but frown. It wasn't as delicious as Jojo's Lotus. Arbor wondered if Lotus, who had insulted Jojo before, had recovered from his grief. How should I comfort him later? Arbor thought to himself, but his face remained expressionless. Fifth young Master Cheen ate a mouthful without tasting the food. The holy rice was soft and easily melted in his mouth. It was no wonder that people in the entire imperial capital would fight every day for this bowl of rice. As for the stewed meat with mushrooms, to be honest, the taste wasn't that great. It was a little salty, and it was a little hard to eat. But he ate them all. Since he bought it with money. It would be a waste if he didn't finish it. Of course, the little girl couldn't finish the remaining half of the pot of mushroom stew. She frowned as she looked at the half-filled pot and got up to pour it out. Cheen Shio frowned and called out to her. "What are you doing?" "Pour it out." Boom! An S-shaped thunderclap streaked across the horizon, abruptly lighting up the night sky and illuminating a dark figure at the cave entrance. If it was another lady, they would definitely shriek in fright. Yet the little stoic was still expressionless. Her small hands moved faster than her brain, and a volley of concealed weapons flew directly at the cave entrance. This was truly awesome. Chapter 3858. Cheen Shio couldn't resist closing his eyes to observe 3 seconds of silence for the people at the entrance. Ah, ow, hey, Io, Io, Io. A barrage of needle-like, concealed weapons rapidly landed on the people at the entrance, and several howls were immediately heard. The little girl took out a illumination pearl from her inner world and heartlessly shone it at the entrance. She saw 5 or 6 unlucky fellows covered in mud lying limply at the entrance. Their necks were crooked and their eyes were drooping, and they were already foaming at the mouth. Oh, right. Those concealed weapons seemed to be coated with poison. Was it bone-softening powder or vomiting medicine? She couldn't remember. In any case, she smeared a layer of poison on all the concealed weapons that Duan Yu gave her when she was bored. Regardless of whether they were useful or not, they were used to trick people. Sir Jojo blinked. But why did the attire of the people in front of the cave look so familiar? She lowered her head and looked at the pure white uniform she was wearing. Then she looked at the other party's muddy monkey appearance. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't hard to see that they were wearing the same academy uniform as her. It was just that the white had long been dyed pitch black. Oh, they were Royal Academy alumni. No wonder they looked a bit familiar. Cheen Shio expressionlessly looked at the unlucky fellows at the entrance. He truly didn't want to sympathize with them. The main reason was that he was also very unlucky in his current position, so he didn't have the energy or strength to sympathize with others. Sir Jojo pattered to those people and expressionlessly said, "Hand over all the rubies you have." Cheen Shio. This guy actually had the personality of looting a burning house. He couldn't bear to look at it, all right? Those alumni looked so miserable right now. Couldn't the little fellow treat them a bit better? She opened her mouth to ask for points by robbing rubies. He inexplicably recalled that day in Wind Thunder City. This imp also insisted on bringing him back to the academy to exchange for points. He felt a bit irritated for no reason. The little fellow was holding an illuminating pearl in her hand. At this moment, the entire cave was illuminated by the pearl in her hand. Who couldn't see her paralyzed face clearly? Crown, Prince Consort. The head of the students, who looked like a mud monkey, almost dropped his jaw to the ground. What a tragedy. Meeting the little crown princess 4 times in a day. What kind of tragic life was this? That's right, this was the team that the little crown princess had robbed 3 times in a row with the little spatial energy in her body. When the 8 people in the group saw the young crown prince consort, their eyes revealed a trace of extreme misery and despair. Sob, what a tragic life. Didn't he tell Fatty and the others where the little crown princess went? In the end, the other team members did not manage to find the little crown princess. Instead, it was their 4th encounter with the little crown princess. What kind of melodramatic plot was this? What should I do if I want to cry? Behind them came the sound of sobbing. The young female teammate of their team was really crying. She was crying very sadly and miserably. The little crown princess looked at them expressionlessly. She also recognized them. They had robbed people 3 times in the afternoon, and they seemed to be the same group of people. Fate was such a wonderful thing. What did she do about it? Who are those behind you? The members of Team Fate scattered to the sides, allowing the group of alumni behind them to show their faces. Arbor looked at the few people in front and found them somewhat familiar. Chapter 38:59. But since they were schoolmates, they must have met each other before. Xiao Xiao was too lazy to carefully identify them. She swept a glance at them and very dutifully shouted, "Hand over the rubies on your bodies." Everyone, if they were capable enough, they really wanted to beat this little crown princess to death. It was too infuriating, asking people to hand over their rubies at the drop of a hat. How much of a scammer was she? Wait a minute. The people at the back spoke weakly. They didn't want to argue with this little crown princess. They dug out their rubies from their pockets and handed them over with a hopeless expression. If they didn't hand them over now, they would probably be beaten up and search for their rubies. As long as they weren't idiots, they would be able to recognize the situation in front of them. Arbor reached out and took the rubies from one of them. She glanced at him and frowned slightly. "You guys look a little familiar." That person's mouth twitched. He said with a speechless expression, "Crown Princess, have you forgotten? We met on the Bull's Head. You even gave us a ride." "Oh, is that so?" She looked at the few mud monkeys again and vaguely recognized their faces. She nodded and said, "Oh." That person observed a moment of silence for himself and then said pitifully, "Crown Prince Consort, this one is Qiu Fu. These are Lu Pinwen, Han Jing, and Zhang Mingxiu. A few days ago, it was the 4 of us who rode in the Crown Princess carriage. We only parted ways when we reached the entrance of the Phoenix Woods." Arbor completely remembered now. Wasn't it just the Phoenix Woods? She wanted to cheat them of their rubies, but they were smart enough to stay outside the woods and not dare to enter. Haha, it's a small world. Look, it's raining heavily outside. You took our rubies. Can you let us in to take shelter from the rain now? Xiao Mu stepped to the side to make way, and that group of mud monkeys all ran inside noisily. The 2 teams had 15 people, and all of them looked miserable, as if they had been abused by Feng Yuan. What a bunch of unlucky kids. Looks like they haven't been able to recover their cultivation after all these days. Half of the test had already passed. Without cultivation, he couldn't open his inner world. All he did was wander aimlessly in the Phoenixwood forest. From time to time, he would be chased and beaten by the beasts in the forest. His days should be quite difficult. Xiaomu lowered her head to look at the small stew pot in her hand before pattering her way out of the cave. "Crown Princess, what are you doing?" A few pitiful cries rang in her ears. The little crown princess turned her head around with a stupefied expression, her gaze landing on the few of them. "Throw away the leftovers." As soon as she finished speaking, the 15 people from the 2 teams all stared at the small soup pot in her hand. Can it not fall? Can you leave it for us?" The little crown princess suddenly felt a little embarrassed being stared at by these people. Arbor stiffly held the pot of mushroom stew. She said expressionlessly, "It doesn't taste good. It's fine." Qiu Fu, Lu Pinwen, and the others walked up and stared at the soup pot in her hand. It was as if she were to throw the things in the pot out, it would be a very wasteful act. Chapter 38:60. Actually, this was just leftovers from half a pot. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at them and silently handed the soup pot to Qiu Fu. 2 drops of tears actually flickered in that fellow's eyes, and he simply prostrated himself in gratitude to Arbor. The 15 people surrounded that pot. Without chopsticks or bowls, they directly grabbed the small mushroom stew with their hands and ate with elation, as if they were eating some delicacy. 5th young Master Qin put down the chopsticks in his hand. Looking at this group of students' sallow and emaciated appearances, he instantly felt a bit unwell. Weren't they all Spirit Realm cultivators? Logically speaking, they should be much stronger than a normal person like him. Why were they so miserable in a different environment after having their spiritual senses and spirit energy sealed? Wasn't this a problem? Arbor lowered her head to look at her small hands. She was very clear about how her culinary skills were. It was just something that could barely be eaten. Cooking was just about cooking the food. Judging from Chiu Fu and the others' expressions, it was as if the dishes she cooked were very delicious. Thinking back to her previous life, when she was especially destitute, she still had to dig for wild vegetables with the team to eat. She felt that just soaking the wild vegetables in soup was the world's most exquisite delicacy. Seeing Chiu Fu, Lu Pinwen, and the others like this, Arbor's heart stirred slightly. When people were extremely hungry, even if they could eat a mouthful of wild vegetable soup, it would still be the world's most delicious food. Her days in this life were too good, and sometimes she couldn't recall those desolate events from her previous life. If this half-pot of small mushroom stew had been placed in her most impoverished days in her previous life, it would have been something that couldn't be bought with money. Wasteful and shameful. The little fellow silently chanted 3 times in her heart and made up her mind to never waste ingredients again in the future. A half-pot of small mushroom stew for 15 people was wiped out in a matter of minutes. Of course, it was impossible that it was enough. After all, 13 of the 15 people were grown men. How could half a pot of small mushroom stew be enough? It was just enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Arbor speechlessly glanced at them and said indifferently, "Do you want white steamed buns? The kind without any stuffing." Who cared if there was stuffing or not at this time? The 15 heads simultaneously nodded vigorously at her. Arbor took out 30 white buns from his inner world and threw them to them. Each person took 2, and everyone wolfed down the food in an unrestrained manner. Arbor looked at Chiu Fu and asked expressionlessly, "How long have you been hungry?" Chiu Fu thought for a moment. "I've been hungry for as long as I've been apart from you." They could only blame their team's bad luck. Not long after they entered the forest, they encountered a pack of wild wolves. While fleeing, 2 of the team members were injured, and one of the alchemists went missing therefore. What happened next was a tragedy for their team. Without the help of an alchemist, there was no way to remove the sealing pill on his body. The 7 of them still had to protect a female team member. The past few days had been as miserable as one could imagine. The past was simply unbearable to look back on. Chiu Fu felt his balls ache. Arbor glanced at them. "Is your team missing someone?" "That's right. Not long after we entered the forest, the alchemist got separated from our group while we were retreating in a hurry. After that, we have been searching for that alchemist in the Phoenix Woods. Unfortunately, we have not been able to find him." So pitiful. Arbor glanced at them. No wonder there were no spiritual energy fluctuations on your bodies. So the alchemist got separated. Chapter 3861. Then what was the point of playing? After the Pill Master went missing, the entire team couldn't possibly recover their strength during the competition. That was why Chiu Fu and the others also knew that they couldn't keep the rubies on them at all. If they could give them to the young crown princess, then give them to her. In any case, giving them to someone else was the same, so why not give them to someone they were familiar with? Chiu Fu and the others thought in distress, and this strange thought flitted across their minds. It was as if they would be more willing to give them to the crown princess. Arbor looked at them rather sympathetically. "Do you want to drink water?" The 15 people nodded in unison. Arbor took out several large jugs of water from his inner world and tossed them to them. "It's already late tonight, so have a good rest after eating. We'll talk tomorrow if there's anything else." Sitting on the side, 5th young Master Qin remained silent from beginning to end. If he hadn't been able to see through it before, he was now able to see it clearly. The little stoic really didn't like him very much. Otherwise, why didn't she say anything to the other students when she gave them steamed buns and water? Why didn't she extort money from them? Originally, these things weren't much to her at all, and she would give them out depending on her mood. If she was in a good mood, the stoic face would probably be willing to give anything. If she was in a bad mood, then she could only chuckle. So the little stoic was in an extremely bad mood towards him? Then why did she come to save him? The 5th young master couldn't figure it out no matter how much he thought about it, and he also didn't understand the stoic face's complicated and ever-changing thoughts. After so many days, Xiao Fu and the others ate until they were full for the first night and didn't have to endure hunger anymore. It had to be known that they were truly unlucky. Their party encountered a pack of wild wolves whose combat strength was much stronger than theirs, and they faced the situation of being besieged by thousands of wild wolves. All the offensive spirit weapons they could take out were basically used up in that battle. It was to the extent that they didn't have any methods to capture animals at all in the later stages of the battle. A group of miserable normal people shuttled through the mountain forest. One of the team members also vomited and had diarrhea for a long time because he accidentally ate a type of wild grass. As a result, everyone didn't dare to carelessly eat any plants in the forest anymore. Hence, everyone held onto the determination that cultivators would be fine even if they starved for a few days, and they starved themselves for several days. They subconsciously made themselves forget the fact that they were just a bunch of ordinary weaklings in any case. The more he spoke, the more tears he would shed. After nightfall, the weather suddenly turned cold. Everyone curled up their bodies and leaned against the cave wall to continue resting. Arbor heard a soft cry of pain. He opened his eyes slightly and turned his head to look under the moonlight. Fifth young Master Qin was currently hugging his arms in a corner of the cave, curling up into a shrimp-like ball. His entire body trembled slightly in the cold wind. He pursed his lips tightly and tried to suppress the sound of pain in his voice. Arbor leaned over expressionlessly and asked indifferently, "How are you?" But this guy didn't pay any attention to her. He just leaned against the cave wall and continued to groan in pain. Her body curled up even tighter. Arbor was speechless. She reached out and grabbed his wrist to check his pulse, muttering to herself, "You really are pampered. You eat the same thing and drink the same water, yet you still have stomach discomfort." Truly, it was tiring to meddle in other people's business. Sir Jojo reluctantly took out silver needles from his inner world, found the right acupoints, and pricked him twice. Then he took out a blanket and covered him. Chapter 3862. Early the next morning, Qin Xiu opened his dazed eyes and sat up, still clutching a thin blanket in his hand. By now, the temperature had risen again, and the fellow covered in the blanket was sweating profusely. Perhaps it was because he was sweating, but he felt much better than yesterday, and his body also felt much more refreshed. Among so many people, only the little stoic had an inner world. So it went without saying who this blanket belonged to. Arbor walked into the cave against the light. When she saw everyone rustling and getting up, she said expressionlessly, "There's some hunted game outside. Go wash, peel, and roast it yourselves." Xiao Fu and the others were overjoyed when they heard this, and they repeatedly thanked her before hastily leading them out to work. Arbor had already strolled around the vicinity and knew there wasn't any danger, so she didn't bother to care about those people. She had already eaten breakfast outside just now, a bowl of porridge, a meat bun, and 2 pastries. She felt a little stuffed, so she stretched her limbs while she was at it and hunted a few wild rabbits and flamingos for them. She definitely wasn't taking care of these weak academy classmates out of the goodness of her heart. Miss Jojo, a female teammate in Xiao Fu's team, cheerfully ran to her side and said, "The game has already been washed and roasted. Let's eat together." Arbor shook her head. "You guys eat." "Okay then." The female student nodded and turned to look at fifth young Master Qin. "This student, you should also eat." The morning light was just right. A group of Imperial Academy students sat around several grills and started eating in a lively manner. The fifth young master held half a roasted rabbit leg in his hand, and his gaze flickered as he looked in the direction of the cave. His line of sight inexplicably landed on the little stoic, only to see her expressionlessly walk out of the cave with a taut little icy face. She didn't speak to anyone and went to pick herbs nearby, minding her own business. After last night's rainstorm, the smell of vegetation in the forest was very dense today. Sir Jojo picked herbs for a while when she immediately heard the sound of swords clashing in the wind. The little guy pricked up his ears and listened carefully for a while. Then, he suddenly stood up and hurriedly ran towards the source of the sound. Xiao Fu and the others had just finished eating. When they saw the little crown princess turn around and run off without another word, they hurriedly followed her. However, they were just a group of ordinary people after all. How could they keep up with Arbor's speed? They could only roughly follow her. After running for about a li, they saw a large pack of wild wolves in front of them. Xiao Fu and the others were startled and quickly stopped. "I'm fine." Lu Pinwen heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the scene before him. At first, they thought that they were unlucky enough to encounter the pack of wolves again. However, when they took a closer look, they realized that the situation was already under the control of the little crown princess and the others. It was a young crown prince consort's teammates who were fighting alongside her. Qi Xianxian pushed aside a wild wolf and kicked it away. She then turned around and smiled at Arbor. What a coincidence! They had only robbed a few students from the royal school when they encountered a pack of wild wolves. They didn't expect that Jojo would rush over when they were retreating while protecting that group of weaklings. They had been very worried these past few days. Now that they saw that Arbor was fine, they were naturally overjoyed. After the pack of wolves was chased away, they looked at each other with smiles. Before they could speak, they heard a rustling sound. A rain of arrows suddenly shot down from above the forest. Chapter 3863. Fuck! Qi Xianxian and the rest were enraged. They had been on tenterhooks for a few days and had finally met Charles. The main thing was that they had not even exchanged a few words with him before he came up with such a joke. They did not know how long these mediocre archers had been hiding in that tree, and now they were taking the opportunity to shoot at them. A portion of the arrows were fiercely shot towards the defenseless students. The crowd immediately let out a few cries of agony. Some students were shot in the hands and feet, while others were shot in the buttocks. One person was even worse off when an arrow brushed past his forehead. Not only was his face disfigured, blood spurted out from his wound. His companions were so frightened that they could not help but cry out in pain. Qi Xianxian waved her purple light treasured sword, and a bolt of lightning covered the sword. It exploded a cluster of dense trees, and a wretched figure was dragged down from the tree. That person fell heavily to the ground. Before he could get up, little Fatty took advantage of the situation and stomped heavily on his chest. "Huh." Qi Xianxian laughed coldly. "Who is hiding their head and tail? You even have a black cloth covering your face." A gust of wind blew past that person's face and pulled off his black cloth. One of the students cried out in shock, "Ah, it's you." The rest of the students seemed to have recognized that person. They all opened their eyes wide and pointed at him, shouting, "We've seen you in the small base." At the same time, more than 10 figures jumped down from the tree and pounced towards the student from the royal school. One of them held a large knife and pointed it at Chao Chi's neck as he shouted, "Idiot, quickly hand over the ruby on your body." Chao Chi was so scared that he quickly hid behind Duanmu Qing. He tugged on Duanmu Qing's sleeve and shouted anxiously, "Duanmu, Duanmu, quick, quick, he's coming." Bam! The guy who was waving the large knife was kicked by Duanmu Qing and he fell backwards. He rolled backwards and stumbled a few times. He then used his hands to punch the ground and barely managed to stabilize himself. When he raised his head, he felt a gust of wind coming towards him. Bam! It hit his face. That guy's entire face almost cracked. Okay? He could not help but cry out in pain. At that time, he did not care about his image, mainly because it was too painful. At this moment, he felt as if his facial features had been razed to the ground. Arbor looked around coldly. With a light flick of his finger, countless vines wrapped around him and pulled at the attackers who had suddenly appeared around him. There seemed to be two groups of people who had suddenly appeared in front of him. A group of idiots from the royal school were here to rob the ruby. The other group was recognized by a few of his classmates. They were the guys who had been idling around in the small base all day long, doing business of robbing adventurers for money. Of the group of idiots who robbed the academy, only 2 were cultivators. The rest had not recovered their cultivation, so it was extremely easy to deal with them. In a matter of minutes, they would be able to make them throw away their armor and squat on the ground. The troublesome ones were the 7 or 8 Xiozha in the small base. They seemed to be in a state of disunity, but it was only when they started fighting that they realized that the other party had rich combat experience. Although their cultivation level was not as high as Duan Muqing and the others, when they really fought, they were able to make Duan Muqing suffer 2 small losses. Xiaomu narrowed her eyes and gazed indifferently at one of the burly men who was full of vigor. Chapter 3864. For example, just now, her vines had clearly wrapped around that person's instep, but in the end, that person still nimbly escaped. It seemed a bit interesting. The little stoic's gaze coldly landed on that person. That pitiful, burly man actually felt goosebumps from the little stoic's gaze. His entire body involuntarily trembled, and he also retreated. His retreat caused a comrade behind him to suffer. That person was planning to charge forward, but he was knocked back by the burly man's broad back, and he also involuntarily retreated a few steps. Arbor's cold eyes flashed, and he raised his hand to throw out several tiny particles. Everyone thought that it was a concealed weapon, so they hastily dodged backwards. However, unexpectedly, what Arbor threw out wasn't a concealed weapon at all, but several extremely tiny seeds. Those seeds flew with a whoosh and landed on the arms and legs of 7 to 8 people in front of them. Apart from giving them a huge shock, they all involuntarily dodged to the left and right. A burly man lowered his head to look at the crook of his arm, and he couldn't help but be startled. He thought it was some formidable concealed weapon, but it turned out to be an extremely unremarkable little seed. It was black and not even the size of a fingernail, but this seed was embedded in his arm extremely accurately. Arbor sized up those people and also felt that these people looked somewhat familiar. Duan Muqing knew that the little fellow was face-blind and couldn't recognize these people at all, so he said softly to her, "We should have seen these people when we first entered the small base. At that time, they were playing Pai Gao together, so we met a few times." Arbor uttered an "oh," evidently not taking it to heart. Qi Xianxian suppressed the smile on her lips. She naturally knew very well that the little fellow in front of her would never deliberately remember those senseless people. The burly man in the lead turned his head to glare fiercely at an Imperial Academy student. "Didn't you say that these people are like you and haven't recovered their cultivations yet?" The pockmarked face of the student who was kicked out by Duan Muqing and almost flattened by a slap instantly flushed red. The few royal school students who were sitting beside him turned to look at him in disbelief. One of the students who had recovered his cultivation like Lily could not help but roar. "Lily, you brat, you actually colluded with this group of people and betrayed your own classmates? When did this happen? Don't tell me that you were the one who robbed us before." Regardless of whether they were competitors on the Heavenly Yuan ranking, most of them still had a bottom line. How could they be so cruel to their own school's alumni? It was possible for them to cheat each other, but they would never do something that would endanger the lives of their fellow students. Lily had colluded with the local ruffians of Small Base to rob his own classmates. This was simply inconceivable. Arbor was too lazy to listen to their accusations. He raised his hand, and the expressions of the robbers changed slightly. A few of them fell heavily to the ground and cried out in pain. The guy who had planted a seed in his arm was currently holding his arm, his head full of sweat as he cried out in agony, "Miss, please, please have mercy." Everyone looked up and saw that the seed on the man's arm was now sprouting from the depths of his flesh and blood. Miraculously, it had sprouted a little. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at the other person. Chapter 3865. The places where the seeds had hit the rest of the people were now no different from the burly man. From the place where the seeds were embedded, they began to sprout. Green roots and leaves were shooting straight up from the bones and blood. That appearance was truly somewhat frightening. The most important thing was the feeling of the body. It was horrifying and painful, as if the pain that came from the blood vessels was innate to the body. It made people want to kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. All the students of the royal school silently took a few steps back and obediently sat in a row, expressionless as they looked at the robbers opposite them. This weirdo was awesome, ah. He actually dared to blindly come and trap the young crown prince consort. Wasn't this just seeking his own death? The crown prince consort was so ferocious, terrifying, that they actually dared to come? If they weren't robbers, then what were they? Looking at the faces of the robbers contorted as they clutched their hands and feet that had poked out of the plants, beads of sweat the size of beans dripping down from their foreheads. For some reason, the royal school students, led by Chiu Fu, felt a tinge of sympathy for these robbers. This was the consequence of not being careful and not doing your homework before committing a robbery. Arbor raised his finger, and a wisp of pure with spirit life force slowly seeped out. Following that, the 7 or 8 robbers' faces contorted as they howled in pain. Not only had the seed embedded in their flesh and blood sprouted, but it was also growing at an extremely strange speed, full of vitality. One of the robbers fell to the ground, his muscles twitching as he rolled back and forth on the ground. Everyone was shocked. All the royal school students, under Chiu Fu's lead, silently took 3 steps back and sat up straight. Wow, so many students are here. A mocking laugh sounded from behind the crowd. Chiu Fu and the rest hurriedly turned to look and saw a large group of people walking over. To be precise, this was a group formed by a few small teams from the royal school. There were probably more than 100 people. Arbor's eyes sharpened, and his left hand took out 2 divine power balls from his inner world. Eldest young, Sir Chin jumped in fright when he saw this. Twitching his mouth, he hastily waved his hand and said, Jojo, calm down. Calm down. We won't rob your team, Ma. Put the ball down, don't throw it. This guy was really a little demon. Look, this was the way to go. When he saw a student who was in great danger, he would directly throw a godly power ball at him. Did he think that he and second brother would be able to handle it? Our dear Xiao Mu was instantly on guard. She took a few steps to Duanmu Qing's side and glanced warily at eldest Qin and Omega Katoka's group of about 100 people. How dare you rob over 100 students of their rubies? Jojo looked at them with disdain. What? Eldest young, Sir Qin winked aggrievedly at her and pursed his lips. When we passed by, we saw these unlucky children being captured by some people from the fortifications. We saved them, and they willingly handed over the rubies. The little fellow glanced behind them and asked warily, Where's Lien? Are you guys together? Who's with him? Eldest young Sir Qin instinctively turned to look at the absent-minded and silent second young sir. He coughed dryly and said, We separated from the Crown Prince's team long ago. Chapter 3866. Sir Jojo glanced at them suspiciously and didn't even bother to reply, with an eldest young Master Qin grinned. Jojo, what are you doing? What were they doing? Were they blind? Couldn't they tell that she was teaching these people a lesson? At this moment, the quarrel beside her suddenly grew louder. Arbor turned around and saw that it was that royal school student, Li, who was quarreling with the people in his team. Li seemed to be implying that if he hadn't dealt with those ruffians previously, how could he have protected so many people in his team? He had only come up with this idea because he had no other choice. To let these warriors, who were bored to death in the small base, go and rob the student from the other teams in the royal school. Not only did he satisfy those warriors' greed, but he could also negotiate with them to leave the ruby points for their teams. Wasn't this killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Now that the people in his team were reprimanding him like this, Li was indignant on the spot. Arbor swept a glance at Li, who was still making a big fuss. With just one glance, this fellow was completely silent. Her gaze then landed on those burly men, and she said mildly, Looks like you mobilized quite a number of people. They specialized in robbing the royal school's weak students and fled far away after obtaining a large sum of money. Even if the students recovered their strength in the future and returned to Phoenix Grove to seek revenge, they definitely wouldn't be able to find this group of people. How would the burly men dare to hide anything now? They could only hope that the plants on their bodies wouldn't grow crazily anymore. They were so scary, all right? After confessing their original plan in full detail, all the royal school students were naturally filled with righteous indignation. No wonder it was such a coincidence. A female student standing behind Omega Kitoku couldn't help but curse loudly. I was wondering why our team was ambushed less than 15 minutes after setting up camp. So they were already waiting to set us up? It's so easy to identify people based on our uniforms. We can catch them all. If there were a few people in the group who had already recovered their cultivation, then it would be more difficult to capture them. If they were lucky enough to encounter a group of weak chickens, then it would really be a joke. The little crown princess silently took out a bottle of pills from her pocket and said expressionlessly, "One pill costs 390,000 spirit coins. Once you take it, you'll immediately recover your cultivation and spiritual sense. If you want, you have to buy it." Everyone was speechless. Why was the sound so discordant? Chiofu immediately strode forward and said joyfully, "Crown Prince Consort, give us 7. But I'll have to trouble you to let us take it first." He was a little embarrassed as he said, "We can only give you spirit coins from our inner worlds after you recover." Arbor nodded and poured out 7 pills from a bottle and handed them to them. Chiofu and the others were overjoyed. They quickly reached out to take the elixir. After swallowing it, they immediately took out a large number of spirit coins from their inner worlds and handed them to Little Crown Princess. When the others saw this, they also stood up hastily and crowded around her, afraid that they would run out of pills if they were a step too late. However, these pills were very expensive, so more than half of the people were still hesitant. Little Crown Princess said expressionlessly, "Don't push and shove. There's enough to eat. Those who want to recover their cultivation, line up at the back to buy." The little stoic continued expressionlessly, "Only after recovering your cultivation can you go back to wreak havoc and settle scores with people. If you don't bear to part with a bit of money now, you'll be sullen on your cultivation path in the future. Everyone." Chapter 3867. If I keep feeling indignant every time I think of this experience in the future, wouldn't that become a mental demon barrier in my cultivation journey? Everyone, those who had been hesitating, also got up and ran over. They could earn back 390,000 spirit coins after a few years of hard work. If the little Crown Princess's jinx really came true, Crown Princess, why is it 390,000 spirit coins? Someone asked with a big mouth, and then felt a little uncomfortable. The little Crown Princess's expression was cold as she said coolly, "The original price was 400,000 spirit coins. Since you're my classmates, I'll sell it at a discount of 390,000 spirit coins." "Sir Jojo, you guys are getting a bargain." "Classmate, I shouldn't have asked you that question." Duan Muqing and the others stifled a laugh and coughed lightly, exchanging glances with each other. They knew that their Jojo would definitely say something that would make them want to vomit blood with a deadpan expression. "All right, the medicine has been taken and the spirit coins have been handed over. Let's meet again if fate allows it." Qi Xianxian chuckled and waved at her classmates before pulling Arbor and turning around with a smile. "Jojo, we have to hurry. We don't know if any teams have already found the location of the 1,000-year-old Phoenix Wood. We haven't seen it on our way here." Arbor nodded expressionlessly, tossing the wails of those burly men to the back of his mind. After the Royal School students recovered their strength, the first thing they did was to settle scores with them. They were already being polite by giving them a beating. The little Crown Princess quietly retrieved the seeds from the hands and feet of those people. More than a dozen seeds were now in the shape of small saplings, swaying left and right in her hands. She flicked them into the forest planet and turned to look at the billowing smoke behind her. These people had previously targeted a bunch of pitiful Royal School students with no cultivation. Serve them right for being so unlucky now. "Jojo, let's go together." Eldest young, Sir Qin walked over with a grin. Unfortunately, before he could get close, he was blocked by all the members of the Seacone Planet team, who drew their swords and sabers as if they were guarding against thieves. Please, I really won't rob you of your rubies." Had these people become as comical as the little stoic after being with Jojo for so long? "We're not on the same side as you." Jojo snorted and rolled his eyes. "Xian, over there." Arbor winked at Qi Xian and used his eyes to signal her to walk behind the towering tree. Xian was a little confused, but she still walked towards the tree. "Did you see anything?" Lady Qiao asked. "There is." Xian squatted down and used a small shovel to dig out a scarlet flower. She stood up excitedly and said, "There's a flower." Her voice paused as she looked in surprise at Mu Xingqian and the others, who had just emerged from the side path. "What a coincidence, Jojo. We meet again." Ma Ta cried out excitedly, but his gaze landed on Qi Xuan's small hand. "Does this flower look familiar?" It was a scarlet claw-shaped flower with a very flirtatious, tasseled phoenix tail. The more he looked at it, the more familiar it looked. Qi Xian retracted her hand and reflexively hid the flower behind her back. "Don't even think about robbing me." "Phoenix flower," Mata blurted out. The little stoic ran to Xian in high spirits and heavily patted her. She praised expressionlessly, "Xian, you're awesome. You picked up a phoenix flower." Chapter 38-68. Qi Xian was dumbfounded. Did she really have such good luck? On the other hand, Imo Yin's mouth twitched inwardly. Just as he was about to walk towards his wife, he heard Sir Jojo's crisp voice. "Wow, there's another one here." Mata looked down and saw a phoenix flower unfurling in the soil beside his feet. It was a bewitching red and gorgeous. His brain was faster than his body by 18 seconds. He squatted down at once and carefully dug up that phoenix flower. He beamed with joy and said, "As expected, it's a good thing to see me, Jojo." Ha. We also have phoenix flowers." Arbor nodded expressionlessly and praised again. "Mata, your luck is also pretty good." Everyone, Omega Kitoku's handsome face was cold, and he didn't say anything, but Eldest Qin almost couldn't resist laughing out loud. "Heavens, Jojo, could you be any more fake? Since when did these phoenix flowers become like wild mushrooms, being plucked one at a time? So common. Most importantly, it was very casually growing under a normal tree and buried in the soil. Shouldn't phoenix flowers grow on the branches of phoenix trees?" Although the spectating students had already lost their qualifications to the finals, they still couldn't resist ridiculing. "Why is this phoenix flower growing in the soil? When we passed by earlier, did you guys see phoenix flowers?" Fu walked up to cover his team member's mouth and chuckled in embarrassment. "What nonsense are you spouting? You're blind and didn't see it, so don't say no." Everyone. He had to be rebuked for speaking the truth? Captain Shio's words were so untrue. Duan Yu chuckled and waved his hand in front of Arbor's face. "Jojo, what a coincidence. We all picked up phoenix flowers." Sir Jojo nodded expressionlessly. "MHM, your luck is pretty good." "Emolian, sister, we found a phoenix tree nearby and already took a section. How about we bring you over to take a branch?" Arbor silently put down his hand that was taking out the 10,000-year-old phoenix tree and nodded calmly. "Lead the way." It would be considered cheating if he took it out directly from his inner world. That was why Jojo-sama had thrown the phoenix flower into the ground to make it look like someone had picked it up. Although doing this was also fake, but at least it was so fake that even if people were suspicious, they wouldn't be able to figure out what was going on. "Wifey." Emolian glanced at her pitifully and held the little boy's little hand. "You're ignoring me." Mr. Jojo wanted to throw him away and tell him sternly, "We're not on the same team." However, when she raised her head and saw his pitiful face, she felt a little sympathy for him. Her husband was also quite pitiful. Jojo had been giving him the cold shoulder along the way. "Hubby doesn't want to be part of another team either." So she raised her hand and patted him. "Keep the phoenix flower that Mata picked up for your mother. She can use it to refine medicine in the future." "All right, our team got first place." Jojo asked expressionlessly. Yes, my Jojo will definitely get first place." Prince Simone nodded repeatedly and surrendered without any integrity. "Jojo, we collected more than 700 rubies. I'll give them all to you." "That won't be necessary." Arbor belatedly looked up at him. "Wow, you actually robbed more than 700 people?" Hubby was truly too much of a scammer. She used the power of space to rob back and forth, but she only managed to rob 30 or so rubies. Hurry and run. The venomous bees are coming. Chapter 3869. Emolien was overjoyed as he held his wife's soft little hand. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, he was interrupted by someone. Turning to look, sure enough, they saw a large swarm of poisonous bees rapidly floating toward their heads like a dark cloud. A brawny man, who was beaten dizzy by the Royal Academy students and finally got up from the ground with great difficulty, looked up and saw that dark, cloud-like swarm of poisonous bees. He shuddered in fright, and he almost reflexively sent out a palm strike, which landed in the swarm of poisonous bees like lightning. "Wait!" Omega Katoku's expression darkened. Just as she called out to stop him, she saw that fellow's spiritual energy explode in the swarm of poisonous bees. Hence, the swarm of poisonous bees that were originally in a mess completely erupted. They fanatically flapped their thin wings and buzzed as they rushed toward the crowd. While the man who attacked earlier was still in shock, he was already surrounded by layers of poisonous bees in vengeance. The swarm of poisonous bees heavily wrapped him into a ball. After moving away in a flash, everyone was horrified to see his skeleton scattered on the ground with a crackling sound. How were these poisonous bees? Wasn't this just a swarm of man-eating bees? Sir Jojo calmly opened her eggshell defensive barrier and covered herself with it. Her small body shrunk into the round shell as she ran forward with her little legs. If she didn't run now, would she be waiting to be attacked by man-eating bees? She had no interest in fighting with these millions of man-eating bees. When the little fellow shouted, "Run!" Imo, Lien, Duanyu, Mu Xingqian, and the others instinctively followed her and slipped away. However, those dark clouds pressing down from the sky chased after the crowd rapidly, as if they wouldn't stop until they were all bitten to death. Ah! A mournful scream startled everyone. Someone turned to take a look and couldn't resist shouting, "It's Lily!" Lily is surrounded by the swarm of bees. Everyone couldn't help but tremble. After all, they were all classmates who had studied together for a long time. Suddenly seeing him surrounded by a swarm of bees and being gnawed into a pile of bones in a matter of minutes, everyone was somewhat unable to accept it. At this moment, all the students of the royal school, led by Chiu Fu, were filled with gratitude towards the young crown princess. If the crown prince consort hadn't made them consume the elixir to remove the seal 15 minutes ago, perhaps all of them would have ended up like Li and died here today. Because Li had betrayed the students of the royal school, he was not welcomed by anyone. He had joined forces with outsiders to rob his schoolmates, so naturally, he was embarrassed to mix in with his classmates and ask Arbor for pills. The previous battle had consumed a lot of his spirit energy, and he had also been kicked quite heavily by Duan Muqing. As he ran, he fell behind and naturally became the prey of the bee swarm. Therefore, it was said that many things were fated to happen. Assemble. The moment Lady Qiao Qiao's voice rang out, all the students from the royal school trembled and hurriedly moved closer to her. Eldest young Sir Qin dragged the taut and displeased 13th Qin to Mo Lien's side and hastily shouted, "Prince Mo, quickly think of a solution. Release the air transportation spirit artifact. Do you think the air transportation spirit artifact will work in this place?" And Mo Lien grumpily turned around to glare at him. Couldn't he see that his wifey already had a solution? Chapter 3870. Gather, gather. The little fellow hollered again. All the students from the royal school were very perceptive and tried their best to get closer to her. Everyone formed a small square formation and continued to run forward in an orderly manner. With a wave of Sir Jojo's hand, 36 purple talismans quickly lined up in front of her and flew toward the four corners of the small square formation. They instantly formed a transparent defensive barrier, enclosing everyone inside. At the same time, the swarm of cannibal bees in the sky had already swooped down. Everyone watched in horror as thousands of black fingernail-sized cannibal bees smashed into the defensive talisman array with a thump, 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 thump sound, making heart-trembling sounds. A Royal Academy student stuttered, Your Excellency, Crown Princess, may I ask, how long can this talisman array, how long can it last? Within 15 minutes, it can withstand at most 10 attacks from 1,000,000 bees, Arbor said calmly. So hurry up and run. Where did this bunch of weaklings get so much nonsense from? It was only right to keep up with the speed. The little crown princess exerted force on her feet and flew out with a whoosh. The talisman array naturally moved with her. As soon as she sped up, the Royal Academy students were scared witless and hurriedly chased after her. The cannibal bees in the sky buzzed as if they were blowing the horn of death. They gathered again and swooped down. Thump, 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 thump. Everyone felt their balls ache. Through the transparent defensive barrier, they could see the dense swarm of cannibal bees crawling outside. They really wanted to vomit just by looking at it. Arbor frowned and took out an apple from his pocket. He angrily took a bite and said indignantly, It's already lunchtime. They had been busy until now and hadn't even had time to eat lunch. It was simply too terrible. This swarm of cannibal bees was so annoying. Why did they suddenly run into the forest to attack people without rhyme or reason? Everyone looked at the little stoic with black lines on their heads. Seeing her expressionlessly gnawing on the apple in her hand, her two small eyebrows couldn't help but furrow. Mata twitched his mouth and couldn't help but ask, Jojo, we have to run in the same direction. Where should we run to? I might not be able to get rid of these troublesome fellows for a while. Come with me. Emol Yin took the little guy's hand and said, Next to the 1,000-year-old phoenix would we found before, there is a natural moat. We can lead the cannibal bees there and attack with fire. There are trees everywhere. If they rashly start a fire to deal with the cannibal bees, I am afraid that the entire phoenix wood forest will suffer. Unless they had no other choice, they naturally wouldn't consider destroying such a good adventure holy land. Everyone don't panic. It's good that we have a solution. Come, let's all run. Run. The little fatty carried his double-headed hammer on his back and roared at everyone. He nimbly moved his two short legs and rushed forward. Qi Xian powerlessly raised her hand to support her forehead. She took out a bottle of pills from her inner world and tossed it to Qiufu. Distribute this to everyone. Replenish your spirit energy. Don't worry, we will all be able to escape safely. Qiufu nodded gratefully at her and quickly distributed the recovery pills. After the pills entered their mouths, everyone suddenly realized. No wonder the little crown princess teammates didn't show any signs of fatigue after running for so long. They were all equipped with supreme-grade recovery pills. Chapter 3871. How would everyone know that Arbor had already added the purple underworld herb, a medicinal herb that could speed up spirit recovery, to this spirit recovery pill? Even if one spirit power was exhausted, they only needed one pill to return to their peak state of abundant spirit power within minutes. In a battle, this was naturally a very terrifying medicinal pill. For example, the other party had already beaten you like a dog. Seeing that victory was in sight, you were about to die. Suddenly, a medicinal pill appeared. Seeing that you were full of vigor and vitality, and then come back again, wouldn't this be a very painful thing? Everyone took a deep breath. After recovering their spirit power, they continued to follow Arbor's group as they dashed forward into the forest. Along the way, they encountered two small mercenary teams. Almost within a breath's time, they were completely devoured by the cannibal bees that swarmed over and surrounded them. Everyone was secretly shocked, and their legs sped up even more. What a joke! No one wanted to die in such a lousy place in their prime. The venomous bee swarm is here. Along the way, they heard someone's miserable shriek, but that voice disappeared among the bee swarm in seconds. Wherever the cannibal bees passed, withered bones were everywhere. The bee swarm is already attacked 9 times just now, and the 15 minutes are almost up. Fellow students, what should we do next? Student Chao Chi, who was being carried by Duanmu Qing, asked with a wooden expression. While everyone was running wildly, Scholar Chao's focus was indeed different from the others. However, his words hit the nail on the head and made everyone's hearts tremble. That's right, little Stoic Xiao said just now that this defensive talisman array could protect so many people for 15 minutes at most and withstand 10 attacks from the bee swarm. It turned out that they couldn't withstand it this quickly. Then wouldn't they all become ghosts under the bee swarm? Duanmu Qing smiled faintly. Don't worry. Scholar Chao opened his mouth. Although the Imperial School students beside him didn't understand Duanmu Qing's words, they all felt goosebumps. Boom! The bee swarm attacked for the 10th time. Arbor moved his finger and took out a defensive talisman array made up of 36 jade talismans. He threw it above his head. The bright light of the jade talisman suddenly opened up a natural barrier, replacing the talisman array that was gradually dimming. Arbor placed the talisman array that had lost its talisman power in his hand and casually replenished his talisman power as he said faintly, "How much longer until we reach the heavenly moat? It's so annoying to be chased by these cannibal bees buzzing. I really want to kill them because they are too noisy." As Mo Lien held his wife's small hand, he felt an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. Even if he had to accompany his wife to the ends of the earth, as long as he could hold his wifey's hand, he would be perfectly content. Omega Kitoko snorted coldly and said indifferently, 3 miles. Duan Yu couldn't resist casting him a sidelong glance. In other words, you guys from Omega Kitoku also went there earlier? Luck. Sir Omega Kitoku coldly mocked Duan Yu. Since your team can even pick up the phoenix flower from the soil, why can't other teams find a 1,000-year-old phoenix tree before you? Ha! Duan Yu blinked and looked innocently at Sir Jojo next to him. Jojo, he's insulting me. Sir Jojo glowered and glanced at Sir Omega Kitoku. If you want to compete in luck, aim at me. Everyone suddenly had a feeling of speechlessness, and they didn't know why. Chapter 3872. For some reason, they had a feeling that they couldn't continue chatting. Everyone didn't say anything, but they all grumbled in their hearts. Don't want to talk to the little stoic face. Every time they talked to the stoic face, they always had the misconception that they would immediately be rebuked. They didn't know if they were mistaken. Qi Xian and the others secretly stifled their laughter and coughed lightly. Hey, look, there seems to be a team up ahead, the Royal Academy's student team. The team of 20 or so people opposite them was also a team of 2 or 3 experiential teams. They were currently in combat readiness. Everyone combined their spiritual energy into one and formed a defensive boundary to meet the swooping horde of man-eating bees head-on. The man-eating bees landed on their defensive boundary with thumps, and they could only hear a grinding sound that made their teeth ache. The opposing team was resisting with all their might, and it looked like they were about to be exhausted. Jojo, can we throw these man-eating bees into the storage talisman? Qi Xian couldn't resist asking. It was truly unbearable to watch these schoolmates about to lose their lives here. Arbor shook her small head. A storage talisman wasn't omnipotent. If this many man-eating bees were stored inside, they would only break out of the talisman in a matter of minutes. There were too many of them. It wasn't that Arbor wanted a conspiracy theory, but she felt that something was off. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Young Sir Omega Kitoku said coldly, "There are so many man-eating bees. Even if we store them in the storage space, we won't be able to suppress them." Unless his cold gaze landed on Mo Lien. "Your Highness the Crown Prince is a divine weapon master, so you should have a divine weapon to subdue them." Mo Lien glanced at him dryly. "How can I not think of what you thought of? This Crown Prince indeed has many divine weapons, but most of them are offensive and defensive. Storage? Sorry, I have a wife. My wife has something as convenient as a storage talisman. Why would I need to waste time and effort to make a storage divine weapon? Wouldn't that be a waste of effort? You single dogs without wives don't understand. Duan Yu, haha. Young Sir Omega Kitoka, ha. Eldest young Sir Qin. The atmosphere became inexplicably silent. Everyone felt a little aggrieved by this display of affection. Eldest young Sir Chin swept a displeased glance at Omega Kitoku. Tell me, aren't you asking for it? You clearly know that this guy has a poisonous tongue and a black belly. Why do you keep provoking him for no reason? Wasn't that just making things difficult for him for no reason? Omega Kitoku snorted coldly and turned his head away without saying another word. Yin was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. She raised her hand. An inverted bowl-shaped protective shield covered the bodies of the students on the opposite side. All of a sudden, everyone felt the pressure on them lessen, and the defensive barrier they had set up disintegrated. Everyone slumped to the ground and couldn't help but gasp for breath as they looked at the other side in surprise. Thank you. Thank you. The students hurriedly thanked Yin and the others, their eyes shining with gratitude. If it wasn't for Prince Mo's help, they would have become the cannibal bees' food. Hurry and get up, Arbor hollered. What was a bunch of verbose weaklings spouting nonsense at a time like this? Keep up. She waved her small hand and immediately led everyone in a mad dash forward. On the other side, the several dozen Royal Academy students protected by the defensive divine weapon hurriedly got up and followed after them. Although the stoic face was yelling at them, for some reason, everyone felt an inexplicable sense of security. Chapter 3873. At this time, the team had already expanded to more than 200 people. Under the pursuit of the horde, everyone gathered under a 1,000-year-old phoenix tree. Seeing the cannibal bees buzzing around and swarming downwards, Xian panicked. Oh shit, will these horde bite the phoenix tree to death? Everyone hurry. Work together and quickly dig out the phoenix tree. Arbor, Xian, aren't you worrying too much? The horde doesn't like to gnaw on wood, all right? Xian and the little fatty dashed towards the tree first and quickly took out a shovel from their inner worlds, repeatedly shoveling the soil. Everyone was instantly speechless when they saw the two's coordinated actions. Freaking, can you guys be any more shameless? Everyone just needs to take 1 or 2 phoenix trees to accumulate 2,000 points to enter the finals. What about you guys? You want to take away an entire phoenix tree right away? You're simply deranged. Jojo. Yin grasped her small hand and said, Duan Yu, second young master, and I will lure the horde to the natural moat. You guys wait here. I'll go too. Sir Jojo was itching to give a try. Duan Yu glanced at her and said with a grin, You have to stay here and use the defensive talisman matrix to continue shielding everyone. We can handle such a trivial matter. Arbor thought it made sense, so he nodded. All right then, come back quickly. Eldest young master, second young master, let's go together. Duan Yu winked and turned to smile at the 2 young masters of the Qin estate. Humph. Eldest young master Qin glared at him irritably. Truly, they didn't expect them to be involved in such a good thing. Everyone is in the same boat now, so we should work together. Mu Xingqian nodded and said, Young masters, please. The 2 young masters chuckled at Mu Xingqian, but didn't continue arguing with them. The 2 leaped up and flew out of the defensive talisman matrix together with Yin, Duan Yu, and Mu Xingqian towards the natural moat's precipice. Their speed was abnormally fast, and everyone only saw a few faint afterimages streaking across the sky. In an instant, he disappeared before their eyes. At the same time, Xian and Fatty successfully dug up the pitiful vermilion birdwood with the help of a group of hopeless royal school students. Little Fatty volunteered to carry the tree and turned back to Arbor, flashing his little white teeth. Arbor. Strange, he suddenly had a feeling that he didn't want to talk to the little Fatty. Fortunately, this tree was much shorter than the 10,000-year-old phoenix tree, but it was still 3 to 4 meters away. The tree trunk was so big that 2 people could wrap their arms around it. At this moment, little Fatty was carrying it on his shoulders. Like what? It was like a dwarf carrying a huge log. I've never seen anyone carry an entire tree away. Everyone thought so in their hearts. How could they have known that before this? Sir Jojo had already abducted the entire phoenix tree. On the other side, Yin and the others came out of the defensive array glyphs, and sure enough, they attracted a large group of the cannibal bees, which surrounded them. These cannibal bees were all only the size of a fingernail, but their movements were abnormally nimble. They arrived beside Emolien and the others in a matter of minutes. Emolien and the others looked at each other. Jump! The 5 people jumped down the natural moat's precipice one after another. Omega Kitoku paused in his steps and inexplicably looked back, only to see the little stoic's gaze focused on Emolien. When she saw him look over, she met his gaze. Chapter 38-74. The little fellow's gaze was truly apathetic. She looked at him as if she was looking at an unknown stranger. Love and hate were always present, so it was impossible for her to be completely emotionless. Thus, the most unbearable thing was her complete indifference. She would never have you in her eyes. To her, you might not even be comparable to a beggar on the street or a passerby selling soy sauce. Indifference, this was the most painful part. A chill involuntarily surfaced in the second young master's heart, and he resolutely leaped down. Sir Jojo led the group of students and moved over with the defensive barrier above their heads. A group of students from the royal school looked down curiously with their eyes wide open. The man-eating bees followed Emolien and the others to the precipice. With a buzz, they spread toward the bottom of the precipice in clumps at lightning speed. However, in just a few seconds, everyone saw 2 streaks of black and white flames mixed with the soaring lightning and crushed rocks, completely annihilating large swathes of man-eating bees. The other Royal Academy students stood at the edge of the precipice in shock, staring blankly. The little stoic was expressionless. She took out a storage talisman and caught a dozen or so man-eating bees inside. Perhaps these man-eating bees had some mysteries on them after she brought them back for research. A dozen or so man-eating bees couldn't do much, so they naturally couldn't burst her storage talisman and burrow out. She also wasn't worried that these little things would cause trouble for her. Xiaomu lowered her head to look at the precipice, only to see a black and purple wheel of light emerging from the bottom of the precipice. When the wind blew, smoke and dust drifted into the air, and the smell of burning filled the air. The 5 of them worked together to annihilate the bees and were clearly very powerful. Most of the millions of man-eating bees were annihilated by this attack. The remaining scattered man-eating bees were also caught and killed by the Royal Academy students after they scuttled up. A moment later, the 5 of them jumped up together, naturally unscathed. Arbor looked at Emolien, and his eyes brightened. He originally wanted to reach out and run to her side, but he could only give up when he saw so many people around them. Several people led the man-eating bees swarm to the bottom of the cliff to destroy. Naturally, it would not affect the trees in the Phoenix Forest. However, when everyone looked at the empty hole beside them, they couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He wondered what the mentors would think if they saw the entire Vermilion Phoenix tree being moved away. "Students, I think I heard the voice of the damned dean," little Fatty said expressionlessly as he carried the tree. "An auditory hallucination." No one is hallucinating." Principal Yun floated down and smiled at the crowd. "Are you guys all right?" The swarm of poisonous bees didn't bother anyone, did it? Everyone chuckled. "Now that the matter has been resolved, you have appeared. How timely." Dean Yin turned around and saw the tree the little Fatty was carrying. His eyes lit up. "Student Ko Hongwon, what's that on your shoulder?" "1,000-year Phoenix Wood Tree." A joyous voice rang out. Then, everyone saw a thin figure in a gray robe flash past them. Little Fatty suddenly discovered that a monk had appeared in front of him. He touched the phoenix wood excitedly and nodded repeatedly. "It's the 1,000-year-old Phoenix Wood. It's it. The master looked excitedly in the direction of Dean Yun and nodded at him. Dean Yun immediately knew what was going on. Chapter 38-75. Dean Yin turned to Arbor and the others with a chuckle and said, "Students, everyone performed very well during this training exercise. Although a portion of us encountered great danger, Everyone showed their courage. However, everyone had shown their own courage and brought out the firm belief that a Shioja should have, fearlessly and courageously advancing forward. Arbor looked suspiciously at this cheating dean, suddenly praising them so generously. He felt that there was something wrong with the dean's style. "Hey, great master, what are you doing? You can't openly snatch my phoenix wood." Arbor turned his little head and saw the little fatty hugging his phoenix wood with a flushed face, fighting back and forth with the gray-robed monk like they were in a tug-of-war. For a moment, Arbor felt speechless. Everyone also felt that the scene in front of them was a bit hard to accept. That great master grabbed one end of the phoenix wood with all his might, trying to snatch the phoenix wood from the little fatty's hands. This scene inexplicably gave everyone a headache. Dean Yin chuckled and pressed his hands together. He coughed lightly and said, "Students, the 1,000-year-old phoenix wood is also an innocent life. We can't just dig this tree out and ignore its life and death, right? Student Ko Hong-won, give the tree to Great Master Wu Yen first. Let the Great Master bring it back to our academy to plant." Seeing that the Seekong Star team's gazes were all drifting in his direction, Dean Yin coughed awkwardly and said, "The academy won't snatch your phoenix wood. Don't worry, our academy will put up a sign in front of the phoenix wood stating that this tree belongs to your Seekong Star team." Everyone's mouths twitched silently. Could this cheating dean be any more cheating? The little fatty was unwilling to let go of his tree, and his face was completely scrunched up. "Anyway, you can't snatch my tree. This tree belongs to Jojo." "Right, it belongs to Jojo." Chi Xian Xian and the others nodded in unison. "You want to snatch the phoenix wood? Humph humph. I don't care if you're a cheating dean or not. I'll beat you until you're looking for your teeth all over the floor." Everyone's gazes instantly shifted to Arbor. However, he saw the latter looking at Yun Piaomiao expressionlessly, her small eyes full of disdain. Dean Yin instantly felt extremely stifled. He hurriedly went forward to count. 1, 2, 3, Student Xiao. Your tree should be able to extract a total of 10 drops of 1,000-year-old phoenix wood heart. Ha ha ha. In that case, I'll give you 20,000 points. Everyone's jaws dropped to the ground. 20,000 points in this way. Which team could catch up to the points of the Stoic Faces team? Hee hee. For the sake of this tree, Principal Yin was really unscrupulous. "Dean, let's not beat around the bush," Chi Xian Xian said angrily. "The academy came up with such a rotten idea previously. It's obvious that it's a scam. How is this for us to train in the Phoenix Forest? Your purpose is for the Phoenix flowers and Phoenix trees, right?" Dean Yin blinked his innocent dog eyes. "No, carry it away." Chi Xianxian waved her hand. Lu Yu, Jiang Shaoxin, and the others immediately rushed forward to help the little fatty snatch the phoenix wood back from the monk's hands. "Hey, wait. Dean Yin looked helpless as he went forward to block the little fatty and the others. He said gently, "Students, don't be agitated. Chapter 3876. Students, if there's anything, we can discuss it properly," Dean Yin said with an aggrieved expression. Arbor pattered over with a displeased expression. She glanced at Yin Piaomiao and shouted rudely, "Do you want to rob us?" Beside them, Great Master Wu Yin hurriedly shook his head and sized up Arbor. He coughed lightly and said, "Little fellow, this phoenix wood shouldn't be pulled out for too long. It needs a special environment to be planted. Otherwise, it might die." Arbor harumphed and walked straight to the 1,000-year-old phoenix wood. She raised her hand to touch it, and a faint trace of vitality entered the phoenix wood's body. This fellow instantly stretched its leaves in delight. Chi Xianxian laughed heartily. "Do you see that, Dean, this great master? This phoenix wood won't die, so you don't need to worry about it." Dean Yun helplessly glanced at Great Master Wu Yan. It wouldn't be a problem for anyone to find this freaking tree. Yun Piaomiao could guarantee that she could swindle the tree from the other students. However, the one who found the tree was Team Seekong, this strange team. As everyone knew, none of the members on their team had a normal logical mind. Classmate Xiao, Dean Yin called out pitifully, "Can you guys raise it?" Arbor rolled her eyes at the dean. The Phoenix Wood's growing environment has to be at least a spirit domain. You're bringing it back to a place like the Academy where there's so many people and gossip. Humph. Arbor swept him a glance, and her small eyes peeked at Qi Xianxian. Give it to them. Qi Xianxian immediately understood and took out a phoenix flower and a phoenix wood branch, tossing them to the dumbstruck Dean Yun. Dean, we have enough points. We don't need as much as 20,000. It's a phoenix flower. Great Master Wu Yin pounced over with an especially excited expression. Before the dean could catch the phoenix flower, he carefully reached out to hold it first. The dean spun around and pinched that phoenix wood branch. He looked at the little stoic face in front of him with a complicated expression. Did this classmate Xiao save the world in just a few short days? Otherwise, how could she have such good dog's hit luck? Fellow student, may I ask where you got this phoenix flower? Wu Yin isn't dumb. It's not like he doesn't have eyes. The phoenix tree before them had never bloomed before. Thus, the phoenix flowers did not fall from it at all. Moreover, looking at the plump and translucent appearance of the phoenix flower's leaves and roots, it really didn't feel like a flower that had fallen from a 1,000-year-old phoenix tree. Arbor was expressionless. Qi Xianxian didn't reply. On the other hand, the group of students next to him had strange expressions on their faces as they said in unison, "Picked it up." Duan Yu couldn't resist covering his face. These students had all been dealt a heavy blow by the little stoic. Right now, their expressions and intonations were actually developing in the direction of the stoic Master Wu. Yin was stunned. He thought he was hallucinating. Picked it up? He blinked with a look of disbelief. May I ask, where did you pick it up? Why didn't he have such good luck? He, Dean Yunjiong, and the other instructors had wandered around Phoenix Grove countless times. Why didn't they pick up a single phoenix flower? Under a camphor tree, everyone said in unison, followed by a chuckle. Yun Piaomiao twitched her mouth and sneaked a peek at the little girl's expressionless face. Chapter 3877. Cough, 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 Master. Let's not dwell on this. There's no point in dwelling on it. There's no way the little girl would give them the entire phoenix wood. However, with this phoenix wood and phoenix flower, it should be enough to collect the phoenix wood from the other students. Dean Yin turned his head and glanced at the monk who was staring at the phoenix flower with bright eyes. Letting out a cough, Principal Yun gave the master a few meaningful glances before he finally calmed down. He nodded and said, "If that's the case, let's hurry back to the academy. Since they can't trick him, they won't try any more of the people around the little girl. Don't look like people who are easy to talk to." Arbor looked at them suspiciously and suddenly stepped forward and asked, you guys, you don't want the phoenix flower and phoenix wood to make the soul-returning pill, do you? She hit the nail on the head. Master Wu Yan's expression didn't change as he chuckled. Little girl, why do you say that? Arbor sized up the master. Who are you guys trying to save? Master Wu Yan had an inexplicable feeling that he couldn't keep up with the little guy's jumping thoughts. Dean Yin hurriedly stepped forward and chuckled. No. Students, the countdown isn't over yet. Why don't you guys continue your training? Master, let's go back. Phoenix wood alone isn't enough to make the soul-returning pill. The crowd watched as the little fellow spoke slowly. With a flick of his finger, he suddenly took out a snowfield flower and a stalk of remote ghost grass from his inner world. He said faintly, "Snowfield flower and remote ghost grass are indispensable." Master Wu Yan's eyeballs almost fell to the ground. He widened his eyes, and his face was filled with disbelief. Little girl, it really is a snowfield flower and ghost grass? Master Wu Yan's expression instantly became somewhat disillusioned. He even cursed Yun Shuang a few times in his heart. The little girl has everything in her hands. Isn't this a waste of time? Seeing that the master unexpectedly reached for the snowfield flower, Arbor withdrew her hand and threw the items back into her inner world. These 3 items alone aren't enough to make the soul-returning pill. Even if you have the phoenix flower to increase the success rate, it still won't work. You're still missing a primer. Arbor flipped his hand and took out a small green fruit that glowed with red light. Bloodshed vermilion fruit. Wu Yan couldn't keep his cool anymore as he exclaimed. The bloodshed vermilion fruit A genuine bloodshed vermilion fruit was held in the little girl's hand, exuding an alluring fragrance. Principal Yin also blinked his eyes, completely unable to keep up with this girl's jumping rhythm. He had gathered all the medicinal ingredients for the soul-returning pill. What kind of luck was this? At this moment, Dean Yin was deeply suspicious. Previously, the students had said that Planet Seacomb's battle team had casually picked up a phoenix flower under the camphor tree. This matter should be true. After all, a person with such great luck might be able to dig out treasures just by casually stepping on him. Arbor retracted his little hand, his little face solemn. "Who are you saving?" Master Wu Yan's expression froze, and he looked at the little guy with a complicated expression. He hesitated and didn't speak. Dean Yin glanced at him, using his gaze to ask if he should say it. Master Wu Yan silently glanced at him before bowing and saying, "Benefactress, please bestow the medicine." Chapter 3878. Arbor's heart started pounding madly, uncontrollably. She didn't know why, but she had a strange intuition that this matter might be related to her. Who exactly were they trying to save? Who needed a saint-grade pill like the soul-returning pill? Why couldn't they just tell her who they were saving? "Jojo." Emol Yin held her small hand and shook it lightly. "What are you thinking about?" An hour ago, that great master Wu Yin solemnly asked the little stoic to bestow medicine. The little stoic expressionlessly looked at him for a long time before finally handing the medicine to him. She didn't ask anything. However, Emol Yin and the others could sense that the little fellow's current mood didn't seem to be good. After parting ways with the other Royal Academy students, a heavy and stifling atmosphere circulated among everyone. When the little stoic didn't speak with a listless expression, Emol Yin felt that his entire mood had also turned bad. How could the little fellow not be happy? Little Fatty carried the Royal Phoenix wood and walked behind everyone for a while. Suddenly, he asked weakly, "Chow, Chow Chow, can you put the Royal Phoenix wood away first?" As he walked while carrying the tree, the passing adventurers all looked at him like he was an oddball. This made him feel faintly melancholic. Arbor was startled and then stopped walking. She looked at the little fatty with sympathy in her eyes. The star domain is still being replaced. What did that mean? The little fatty's round face revealed a strange expression. Qi Xianxian couldn't resist tugging at her lips. "It means that you still have to carry it." A bolt from the blue. Little fatty immediately revealed an expression as if he had nothing left to live for. He dragged his voice and said, "Jojo." Arbor's agitated mood improved slightly. She flicked out a purple storage talisman and put away the 1,000-year-old phoenix wood that the little fatty was carrying. Emol Yin looked down at her and said softly, "He's probably hungry from all that commotion just now. Let's set up camp and rest first." Arbor nodded. In any case, they had found all the mission items they needed to find on this trip. In the next 3 days, as long as he could find the fragment of her soul that his master had mentioned, everything would be fine. After the two teams settled down, Emol Yin took Arbor's little hand and walked around nearby, mainly to appease the little girl's mood. "Jojo, could it be that you think that the people the Dean and the others saved while searching for the Phoenix wood are related to you?" Arbor nodded and looked up at her husband with a look of annoyance. Intuition. Others didn't know the little fellow's temperament, but Emol Yin knew it very well. If the little girl said that it was her intuition, then it was probably not far from the truth. "Since they didn't tell you, it must be because it's not the right time yet," Emol Yin said softly. "Don't worry about Jojo. If there's really a need, I believe that with the Dean's character, he definitely wouldn't mind asking for your help." Xiao Mu creased her small brows and gave a muffled "Amichum." "Jojo, do you know how I was able to accurately pinpoint your location in this boundless forest?" Xiao Mu blinked, her small hand clutching his lapel. "Fate." Emol Yin really didn't expect the little fellow to say this word. He nodded repeatedly and said, Right, this is fate." "Humph." The little stoic harumphed and retracted her hand to glance at him. "You must have placed a strand of divine perception on me. Don't think that Jojo didn't know that this fellow did this every day. Emolian hugged her body and nuzzled her small head, remarking with a smile, "You guessed wrong." Chapter 3879. Then why? The little stoic couldn't help but be curious. Judging from M.O. Lien's secretive appearance, could it be that he was hiding some treasure to spy on her? Sir Jojo wrinkled his small nose. M.O. Lien smiled faintly and took out the holy wood essence that he had been hiding with him for a long time, handing it to the little stoic. Seeing the hint of surprise in her eyes, M.O. Lien's eyes flickered. "Jojo, are you willing to tell me the reason for your soul explosion?" he asked softly as his fingers caressed her cheek. Arbor's small face was slightly conflicted, and she pondered with knitted brows for a moment. "You might not believe me if I tell you. I'll believe whatever you say." Emolian pulled her into his arms and whispered into her ear, "Tell me." Sir Jojo unconsciously pointed two fingers at each other. "Before Omega Katoku gave me a wisp of soul remembrance, I also didn't know that my soul had once exploded." The little fellow lifted her head and stared fixedly at him. "It's true." Emolian couldn't help but laugh, and he nodded while hugging her. "All right, we'll investigate clearly in the future. Of course, if you don't want to investigate and don't want to care about the past, then we won't care." Arbor muttered to herself for a second. "Let bygones be bygones. Let's leave everything to fate. What do you think?" "Of course it's good." He was worried that the little lady would overthink things and enter a demonic state again. Now that he saw her clear eyes and completely unencumbered appearance, he was truly happy on the inside. "Omega Katoku hasn't come to bother you recently, right?" Mo Lien asked solemnly. Arbor shook her head. "I don't pay attention to him." "That's good." Mo Lien smiled as he held up the sacred wood essence in his palm to her, his lips curling up into a smile. "Do you know how I found you?" Xiaomu inwardly rolled her eyes. Looking for Jojo, Arbor saw that the little figure in the holy wood essence immediately turned around after hearing Mo Lien's command and pointed at Arbor's small face through the sparkling green essence. The little one was quite interesting. It was wrapped in a round holy wood essence and kept moving forward. Its two arms were swinging back and forth. It was very comical. Arbor grumpily pinched him. "How long have you kept it to play with you?" This guy must have found her soul remembrance long ago and kept it by her side to play with her. Emolian blinked and replied innocently, "Not that long." Jojo was so cute. She really didn't want to give him this soul remembrance's soul. "Forget it. I'll just be a little mechanical puppet and keep Jojo by my side." Seeing the little fellow's disbelieving expression, Emolian quickly changed the topic. "Ah, Chow Chow. I also found little five. Here you go." Emolian stuffed the confused little treant into Arbor's hands from her inner world. That guy was still sleepy, but when he saw Arbor, he felt a sense of familiarity and subconsciously burrowed into her arms. Lord Jojo was pleasantly surprised. His little hand hung on his waist, and he shouted happily, "When did you find it? Did you find it in the Phoenix Forest?" Her husband was too amazing. He even found a piece of the little tree fragment. This time, the little tree should be able to continuously advance. She wondered if it could advance to the mature stage in one go. "Jojo, did you just say that the star domain is changing and is advancing?" Her two-faced husband had once again successfully changed the topic. Arbor was immediately led astray by him. She nodded and said yes. "Husband, when the advancement is over, the star domain will become the divine domain." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.